Sound test for JDMC on the 17th December, sound test at 9:30. Test, test.
It's working, good. My name's Councillor Peter Fane, and I'm the chair of the committee. I'd like to welcome you all to this meeting of the Joint Development Management Committee. For the record, 10 a.m. Wednesday, 17th of December 2025. Agenda item 1, apologies. So, are you going to read them out or shall I? I'll read them out. So I've got apologies from Councillor Richard Stobart, and I think Councillor John Williams may be able to take his place later, but he's not with us yet. If you're aware of apologies, Councillor Nestor also has pretty convincing apologies. He's in Chile. If you're aware of any other apologies, let us know. I think Councillor Thornborough is going to be a little late, but will be joining us.
Councillor Flaubert is online.
Councillor Flaubert is online. Welcome. Good. So I'm going to ask members to introduce themselves, partly for the benefits of our developer visitors, so thank you for that. So start with my Vice Chair, Simon Smith.
I'm Simon Smith. I'm a City Councillor for Castle Ward.
I'll let members work out for themselves which order to go in.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Katie Parr and I represent Market Ward for the City Council.
Hello, I'm Councillor Martin Carr and I represent Histon and Impington Ward in South Cambridgeshire.
Hello, I'm Tim Griffin. I'm a city councillor for the Coleridge Ward.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Anna Bradnam and I'm I'm the District Councillor for Milton and Waterbeach Ward. Thank you.
Good morning, Tumi Hawkins, District Councillor at South Cambs, representing Caldicot Ward.
And good morning, my name is Richard Williams. I'm a District Councillor and I represent Whittlesford in South Cambs.
Thank you, members. We are, as it happens, quorate. Not that it matters this morning, because we're not planning to take decisions. Welcome, Councillor Smart. I'll just let Councillor Smart settle down, and then we'll progress. Councillor Smart, if you'd like to just introduce yourself for the benefit of our visitors today.
Yeah, Councillor Smart, King Sedges, apologies for being late, Chair.
And, as I said, we are quorate. The officers at the table for this meeting, Strategic Sites Delivery Manager.
Good morning, everybody.
And, of course, Sarah Michael, our Committee Manager. James Goddard is our producer today. And also, the table here is John Brooks, who is the Strategic Sites Team Leader. For those who haven't seen it, the agenda for today can be found on the City Council's website under committee meetings and so on. Please, those present in the meeting, note that everything on your desk, including your laptop screen, may be broadcast at some point. And please raise your hand if you wish to speak. For those participating via the Teams meeting, welcome, good. I'll come back to Councillor Thornborough in a minute. For those participating in the meeting via Teams, please indicate you wish to speak via the chat column or raised hand option. Please don't use the chat column for any other purposes during this meeting. So, there are no planning applications on today's committee agenda. We will, however, hear a number of pre-application briefings from developers, and I will welcome the developers in a moment. And members will be encouraged to ask questions or seek clarification on the presentations, but I would remind members that it's best not to express any opinions on the presentation or the proposals, which might suggest or imply predetermination. So just a couple of matters to get resolved before we get into that. Agenda item 2, do any councillors have any declarations of interest? Yes, we'll start with Councillor Richard Williams.
Thank you, Chair. It's item 5, Darwin Green. I'm a fellow of Christ's and I understand Christ has got some interest in that one. And even though this isn't a planning application, I will step out for that one.
Oh, okay. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. 2 items. Item 4, Cambridge Business Park, Milton Road. I have attended a number of the public exhibitions that the Crown Estates have provided as a parish councillor and neighbouring to that, but I've come to this matter afresh. I have asked questions but not expressed opinions at those. And I note that item 6 is the former NIAB HQ. I used to work for NIAB, but following discussions with the legal officers at previous meetings, I am unfettered in discussions on those matters. Thank you.
Right, there are a number of others. Firstly, let me welcome Councillor Katie Thornborough. Did you also want to declare an interest, please?
I'm Councillor Katie Thornborough, Ward Councillor in Petersfield. So for the Crown Estate, I believe, is having some discussions with a trust called the Cambridge Room, and I am a trustee of the Cambridge Room, but I'm not. I don't know whether you're going to raise that or not, but I haven't been involved in a part of those discussions at all.
Now, yes, Councillor Martin Cahn.
So I'm local member for the part of the area which item 5 is related to Darwin Green, and I have been to open meetings and talked about it, but I have not expressed an opinion on the matter, and I'm unfettered.
Did I see any others? I'm sorry, yes, everybody, in fact. Councillor Simon-Smith.
Back to the former NIAB HQ, I have made representations on behalf of residents in respect of previous applications.
Councillor Toomey Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair. It's a bit conflicted here. I have attended exhibition events for the Crown, and also I'm a trustee of Cambridge Room. Anything else I can remember?
Right.
Maybe? Well, yeah.
Anyone else? Yes, Councillor Martin Smart.
I wasn't going to say anything, Chair. I just moved my microphone, but I will.
Yes, I think you should.
Always. We're not deciding anything today, are we, Chair? So
I was going to
guess-
make that point myself.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Any other declarations of interest? I feel rather left out because I have no declarations of interest, so I'm clearly not doing the right things. But as Councillor Smart said, we are not deciding anything today, and indeed, we are expected to come to these meetings with an open mind, not an empty mind. So bear that in mind for our interests. So thank you for those declarations. Let's move on to agenda item 3. We have online the minutes of the meetings on 15th of October and 19th of November. Has anyone had a chance to read those and spot any? I see some nodding there. Any comments on the accuracy of those minutes? So if I take the minutes of the meeting on 15th of October, can I take it by affirmation that's a correct record? Thank you, members. And the same for the minutes of the meeting on Wednesday, the 19th of November, by affirmation. Thank you, members. Good. So, pre-application developer briefings. Let me just say, we do appreciate developers taking the time and the effort to come along and brief us on their plans, and we find it enormously helpful. So thank you for coming today. The first one, of course, pre-application developer briefing, item 4, Cambridge Business Park, Milton Road. And the process for the briefing will be that developers are invited to present for up to 25 minutes, and members of the committee will then be able to ask questions for a similar 25 minutes. Now, can I ask our developers to introduce themselves and their team? I think, Matthew, are you leading on that? Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, and thanks for having us back. So I'm Matt Sampson. I'm the project lead and director at the Crown Estate. We've got Catherine to my right from WSP, our planning expert. Dan, our lead architect from SEW. Tommy, our lead landscape architect. And at the back, in the Christmas jumper, Emma on all matters transport. And Charles from Canda, our stakeholder agency.
Right. Well, welcome to all of you. Matt, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So since you last saw us in June, we've been working through some of the feedback with officers and the quality review panel. Thank you to them for a really productive, challenging and smooth and professional process. Some of the key topics that were raised through that we've been working through were around movement, water, townscape, amenity, housing and nature. So all the big topics you'd expect. And hopefully you've seen in the pack today where we've tried to address some of that feedback and where we've moved proposals on. We've been really pleased with progress to date. When we first did public consultation on our proposals in 2024, 65% of respondents were supportive of what we were planning. We did another round of changes, more iterations on the thinking, and then in June we were up to 80% public support through the next round of consultation. And we've just closed our third round in early December, and we're up to about 90% support now for the proposal. So we're really pleased with that trend. If it continues in sort of Donald Trump numbers, we should be up to 250% support in next year, but we'll see how that works. We appreciate the committee have had quite a few sessions on North East Cambridge. We log into those and we track the feedback and the progress, particularly with the Science Park and Trinity Hall, I think last month. We've been working really closely with district-wide landowners to try and think beyond our red line and use our site to deliver the shared ambition for the whole of the district. And we hope that comes through in our presentation today. We appreciate a lot of the conversation has been around, well, district-wide conversation has been around sort of Hartree and Anglian Water and the uncertainty around that. And we're still very hopeful that that will proceed at some point in future. It would really benefit our scheme and everything else. But given the uncertainty, we feel a sort of greater responsibility in the proposals for the business park to anchor the district, to provide some of the placemaking, some of the district centre that's required to deliver that sort of shared ambition for the wider area. Go through some slides today. So the vision, I won't spend too much of the time on this. This is as we presented last time. Hasn't changed. We're hoping it won't change for the longer term, and we can really hold ourselves to account to this vision, you know, in 5, 10, 15 years' time. One graphic we really like this one. We like to just pause on. We used this for our latest round of consultation. The brief for this was all the feedback we got from the first 2 rounds of consultation to try and it sort of shows the spirit of how we're trying to bring this project forward. We've moved on. It sort of covers, it's a style of graphic that actually you need to kind of zoom in on, and there's a massive printout in our consultation room on the park at the moment. It shows kind of how we're trying to activate the ground centre, the types of community uses we've been asked about, how we might include sports provision, what sort of food and beverage offer there might be, how we connect into the wider district with some of the green corridors. So we tried to capture all of that at this, appreciate an early stage of an outline consent, but just to give a flavour of the level of ambition. Catherine.
Thanks, Matt. So as you can see from this consultation timeline, the Cambridge Business Park team have undertaken extensive consultation since November 2024, consisting of a variety of pre-application consultations with the LPA and other stakeholders and public consultation exercises. To summarise the extent of local consultation, we have spoken to over 600 people across 3 rounds of public consultation, through pop-ups, door knocking, public exhibitions, workshops and ideas exchange events. Our most recent public consultation in November 2025 saw the team deliver a flyer to 13,000 local addresses, host 7 consultation events and engage with a total of 115 local residents. Engaging with the wider community is hugely important to us. We'll continue to engage ahead of showcasing the finalised master plan in 2026. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. So to summarise, one of the key updates on the project since we last met is obviously the change in situation with regards to Hartree and the implications that the Anglian Water wastewater treatment plant staying in place has on our proposals. And most significant, perhaps, in one respect, is actually the environmental constraints that the wastewater treatment plant creates, where it has a variety of odour zone contours which extend onto our site and actually cover around 70% of our site, which prohibit residential land use coming forward within that area. And so our framework has sought to respond not only to how we need to adapt to kind of what was proposed in Hartree no longer necessarily coming forward in the same guise, but also how we've had to adapt the framework to maximise flexibility moving forward through the process to facilitate homes potentially coming forward should that odour zone constraint no longer be in place. This is a parameter plan that we've developed which, given the nature of the application, is an outline application, shows the land use aspirations. And when we last presented to the JDMC, plots N, H3 and H1, H2, which the pointer should be on, were proposed as residential plots. Subsequently, in order to ensure a deliverable scheme from day one, they're now proposed as workspace 2 residential switch plots, which means there are a number of scenarios within which the framework could come forward, varying on whether those environmental constraints remain in place or are removed in the future. Notably, we've also introduced, in response to both consultation and the environmental constraints, the additional opportunity for residential plots at plot K in the centre of the site, and also at plot A on Milton Road. And so moving on to the next slide, you then see the parameter plan in terms of our land use aspirations and proposals, and the illustrative master plan, which we are presenting throughout this pack, which puts employment plots within the odour zone as it currently exists as the deliverable scheme from day one, noting that there is greater flexibility moving forward over the duration of the potential build-out.
Okay, we're now going to take you through the placemaking principles. So we presented a version of these principles to you last time we saw you, but they've since been updated and we've added additional detail. So the first principle is really to bring down the fences to allow people into the site. We very much see this as a site that can connect existing neighbourhoods to the south, to new developments that are coming forward to the north, and to all the development around Cambridge North Station and around the Science Park. Very much also aiming to amplify the ecology around the edges of the site. There's a lot of existing trees. We want to retain as many of those as possible and really amplify the nature that's already there. This is a view along a sketch along Milton Road. So this is very much an illustrative drawing. But looking at how we can improve connectivity and improve the environment along Milton Road. Obviously, any changes here would need to be done in consultation with the Highways Authority, but we think there's real potential to make improvements, particularly at that interface at Milton Road, where the cycle infrastructure is currently not particularly designated, not particularly segregated or good. So we think, yeah, there's real opportunities to improve that as part of the wider development. The second principle is about defining these 3 clusters. So each of the clusters has a separate servicing loop. So the first cluster you can see there in red comes off Milton Road. And then the second 2 clusters, the access comes off Cowley Road. And that allows the rest of the master plan to very much be focused on pedestrian priority space. So there isn't any roads that are running through the centre of the site. We then have significant green spaces that form the interfaces between these different clusters. And the next image shows one of these spaces. So this is the western space. We imagine this space to be very much focused on nature. We imagine it to be quiet, tranquil, for there to be new water bodies, retain existing trees, add additional new trees, and that atmosphere contrasts the other green space, which is more active, and you'll see further in this presentation. Very much looking to prioritise climate resilience, and one of the key ways we're doing that is through retention of existing buildings. So the 4 buildings you can see here in orange are buildings we're looking to retain. And then buildings that are being demolished, we're looking at whether we can reuse some of the demolition material, both within the proposed architecture and within the landscape and public realm. And this image, this sketch, shows one of the existing buildings on the left-hand side and the car-dominated public realm, and then how that would be transformed. So the existing structure would be retained, but the building would be refurbished into a modern lab and office building, and obviously the landscape in the public realm would be completely transformed. We're looking at how we can reuse materials on site. So the diagram at the top goes through the processes that we would need to use in terms of demolishing and storing a material, processing that material, and then installing it in another building or within the landscape. And then the diagrams on the bottom show a number of different ways in which we think we could use reclaimed materials within the landscape, whether that's the parks, the streets, or the playgrounds. We're very keen to stitch into the existing communities, particularly to the south. And one of the key ways we want to do that is through a community use within the framework. So the pink building you can see there, we have designated for community use, and that also anchors the key green space, our largest green space. So we see that as a real opportunity to be able to invite people into the site and to make this feel like it's part of the neighbourhood and not an individual site in its own right. This image is of the largest green space. So here we're looking to create more active uses that will foster a sense of community. So things like play, things like sports, growing space. We're looking to open up a drain, which is currently in a pipe underneath this space. So that would introduce much needed new habitats and connect to the first drain, which sits to the north of this site and eventually leads all the way back to the River Cam as an ecology corridor. We're also looking to consolidate car parking, so we're looking at 2 mobility hubs you can see in brown here, and that will release the rest of the master plan really to be very much focused on pedestrian and cycle movement. There will of course be blue badge on-street parking close to buildings, and there'll be access for servicing and emergency vehicles, but really aiming to consolidate the majority of parking, bike parking as well, within the mobility hubs. This is a view of one of the mobility hubs, which we think could be focused around energy. So really seeing these as multifunctional buildings. They could have active ground floors. This one could have an energy centre that provides energy for the entire master plan. And really thinking about an expressive architecture that means that these are contributing to the placemaking of the master plan as a whole. And really touching on what Matt was saying in his introduction, really trying to focus the energy on the centre of the site, on this east-west connection, both through public space, but also through a real mix of ground floor uses. We've heard through consultation that people really want to see more amenities, more facilities within the area, shops, restaurants, bars, health and well-being uses. So really trying to focus that in the centre of the site. This view is of the main square, which is a harder space in the centre of the site, and we imagine this could be used for events, for markets, would have spill out from active ground floors, and really becomes a place that is full of energy and activity at different times of the day and year.
I think moving on through the principles, another key principle remains intensifying the workspace ecosystem, and in doing that, creating a really rich, diverse new workspace offering which essentially complements the wider district as a whole, offering smaller buildings and larger buildings to really stitch the district together, and also using those buildings to frame new public spaces of various sizes, including this smaller courtyard space as part of what we envisage could be the first phase of development, which we've named the testbed cluster and courtyard. With regards to residential use across the site, we've alluded and referenced the fact that we've needed to change the strategy in response to the environmental constraints of the wastewater treatment plant, and we are currently proposing a 200 to 250 bed co-living building to mark the gateway into the site at Milton Road, outside the odour zone. And then we're also promoting, at the moment, around 190 to 210 homes to complete the street with the emerging BTR neighbourhood that has outline consent and is currently being developed. What you'll see is a number of call-outs which illustrate how plots currently shown as workspace buildings could come forward as residential buildings in the future should the environmental constraints be removed, and that would facilitate up to 500 homes on the site. And so this is an example of the neighbourhood, the mixed-use neighbourhood residential garden as currently drawn within the illustrative master plan. With regards to heights, the approach we've taken to height is very much in keeping with the wider district. And we've established a largely 5 to 7 commercial story shoulder height. We've sought to maximise variety, to increase variety, to use height positively, to identify key gateways. So I've used it as both a mechanism to establish wayfinding within the district, but also to ensure that North East Cambridge is integrated into the city as a whole. And I think it's in keeping with what Science Park communicated last week with regards to acknowledging that there's the historic centre, acknowledging that subsequently there's been suburban growth, but then equally acknowledging the kind of rightful need to maximise variety around the edges and to use height positively to integrate the new edge extensions into the city. This is an aerial view which communicates the massing in a more granular manner and how it responds to and reflects the emerging development around the site. And as we presented in June, we continue to support and champion a variety of characters across the framework and responding to different conditions. And so we continue to propose and illustrate these 4 character areas as communicated within this diagram and as shared through the images which we've shared to date, each capturing a slightly different but complementary character and style.
So this is the updated illustrative plan that brings together all those principles that we've just spoken through. I think it's worth just mentioning that obviously this is an outline planning application, so what you see here is an illustrative design, same with the sketches and the visualizations. They're illustrative designs in one way in which this could come forward within the parameters that we'd be applying for. And we are very much thinking about phasing. It's an ongoing discussion, but we're developing a phasing strategy that will look at how this master plan would come forward long term. And then this is, yet again, just an aerial view that shows how the development stitches into both the existing context, but also the context that will be coming forward in the future.
With regards to townscape and the strategy we've approached, we've alluded to it within the principles, but to go into more detail on that. We very much see Cambridge Business Park as the centre of the emerging district, and when we talk about the emerging district, it's not just the new development coming forward, it's also the existing homes that exist to the south of the development. What you'll see here is a concentric circle which identifies actually where our tallest building within the proposal is located, is very much at the centre of that emerging district. Yes, I can. It's there. These diagrams on the screen, again, hopefully represent and reflect the approach which we've taken to height. It's very much about maximising variety. It's about using height positively by way of wayfinding and maximising the opportunity for increased amounts of public realm and creating space and separation between buildings rather than kind of promoting a single height datum across the entire site. And this is an approach that's been supported throughout consultation, where we've had 68% of our most recent consultation attendees supported delivering a variety of heights across the master plan. And then 82% of respondents in November also responded positively to the approach to landmark buildings within the master plan. The heights that we're looking at exploring go up to 15 stories at Plot A, the co-living proposal at Milton Road, to really mark the centre of the district, the centre of the site. And then there are 2 other landmark buildings proposed at gateways into the site, and they are Plot N, where the point is currently located, which marks the entrance into the site from Nuffield Road from the south and the gateway to the new community green space, and then Plot H4, which again steps up from the neighbouring development to increase variety, legibility and wayfinding. The heights have been assessed from a huge amount of views in a very technical manner. This is the landscape visual impact framework, where we've established around 40 different townscape views, which we've been assessing the scheme from, and we've shared some of those within this pack, which we'll talk through now. And so this is Red Meadow Hill, where what you'll see in the kind of approach is that those taller buildings, those landmark buildings, are legible, and they mark and denote that the kind of northeast Cambridge is there. They don't compete with the historic city centre. There's a significant amount of space, and they do not coalesce, but have kind of just moments where they pop out of the horizon. Similarly, from St Mary the Great, again, generally the shoulder height, which has been established, retains the kind of majority of buildings below the horizon line, but where we have those landmark buildings, so this is plot A, so the tallest landmark building here. This is plot H4, and then, this is plot N. So that's the points, those three buildings where it protrudes above the skyline. Generally, there's space retained between them. There isn't a coalescence of forms, and we're continuing to work through this with the team in terms of how we sensitively design code each of these buildings and conditions. And again, from Fen Rivers Way, the scheme's visible in parts, either partially obscured by the existing tree line or stepping up from the existing development that's emerged of the land north of Cambridge North, which you'll see where the cursor is, to the landmark building, again, to aid legibility and wayfinding within the district. And then this is a view from the most the closest proximity of homes, which is from the Bramblefields Local Nature Reserve, where again, the landmark building is visible, but it's not dominating, and it's kind of marks that gateway for local residents coming from the south into the new district. And this is a composition of a number of views where, in the majority, the development isn't actually visible. In one here from Ditton Meadows, dynamic view, you can see the taller landmark building popping up through and between the trees. But again, it's as an exercise, it's been taken extremely seriously in terms of assessing each of those different viewpoints and ensuring an appropriate townscape response.
So, to summarise, our approach to the outline planning application is not limited to, but will consist of parameter plans, a development specification, design code, and the illustrative master plan. The illustrative master plan will set the foundation for the control of the development, including defining development and massing areas, as well as building heights. The planning application will also consist of development specification, which will set controls relating to the quantum and land use. The design code will provide an additional layer of control to build on the parameter plans and will aid in determining the character and quality of future reserve matters applications. And finally, the illustrative master plan will serve as the key document that future reserve matters applications will need to comply with, supported by additional documents such as the design and access statement. To conclude, we would like to thank you for your time this morning and allowing us to present the future proposals of Cambridge Business Park, and we anticipate that we'll be submitting the planning application in spring next year. We would therefore like to welcome you to ask any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I'm sure after that very informative presentation, members will have a number of questions. Who's going to start us off? Councillor Martin Smart.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. So you've clearly thought about it a lot, but you've not presented it very well. So I've said this before, maybe I'll say it again, but the methodology of showing us images from what's probably an A3 booklet on the screen doesn't work. So I prefer to look at you and listen to what you're saying, which means I can't see the small text on the images, and often the pictures themselves don't really make much sense. So that's unfortunate, but I still get the gist of it in a significant way, and it's great that you've got a master plan. That's good. We don't always see that. So my questions are, on the consultation, your percentages, 65, 80 and 90, that's of how many respondents. On the residential and odour zones, so parts of Milton and North Cambridge are within the odour zone, residential I mean. So is it because the residential that you proposed previously will not work in the odour zone, or is it because it's convenient for you to leave it out? I know that you can work with planners on that. It is possible, mitigation factors, etc., etc. So leading on from that, in terms of the pictures you did show and seeing people and populations, movements and so on and everything, it's, I mean, as a part qualified architect, I hesitate to say it, but it's people that make places, not architecture. So you need the people there. Now, you're going to have the people there when they're working, but on a Sunday morning, it's going to be like the City of London, it's going to be dead. And I mean, residential is one way of populating spaces with people getting activity. Anglian Water is a clear and present problem, and what you're going to do about that. And lastly, what you said about height for wayfinding, is that, and again, convenient for you to have taller buildings, better profits, etc., because a tall building can't be seen behind another building, and you could just have signs. So I'm not convinced by that argument. Thanks, Chair.
Well, Matt, a series of questions and a few challenges there. Do you want to respond to that?
I can respond to some of the questions. I think, so with regards to the odour zone, we had a meeting with the Environmental Health Officer earlier in the year, and residential land use cannot come forward within that odour zone. So it's not a convenience, it's a fact. And so what we presented today is a scheme which is deliverable in its current guise, but which maximises the opportunity for more homes to come forward should those residential, should the odour zone constraints be removed in the future. And so that's kind of in response to the odour zone. I think with regards to height, there are obviously varying positions and opinions on height, and it's very much been developed, as I said, strategically, both from the kind of a myriad of views, but also in terms of maximising variety. Pieces of city develop and evolve organically, and it's not always with a set height limit. It's generally in a way which, just as the city centre of Cambridge historically developed and evolved organically, its taller moments arise for particular reasons, functions. And we've definitely used and promoted height with a functional and kind of positive approach, and that is to help integrate the city into the city. I think we've continued throughout the process to test different options, functions, but increasing variety, maximising variety has always been at the forefront of the thinking with regards to the massing, the roofscape, and kind of trying to increase moments of public realm rather than occupy it with building footprint. I think, were there other points that...
Yeah, I can probably cover a few. Yeah, so with respect to heights, I mean, it wasn't where we started in our brief in November. I think we consulted on a more standard sort of height that you see elsewhere. We got quite negative feedback on that. So when you talk about why did we change, it's not just, when we say variety, it's not just variety is going higher. Variety is some of the buildings we brought down as well. There's some 3-storey buildings being retained, some 4 stories. So it's not a matter of just maximising, it's a matter of through the process, people didn't want to see a consistent wall and blanket sort of fatter buildings that we've got a lot of already. So we sort of, we took that feedback on, tested it quite rigorously. We expect to be, heavy scrutiny around the quality of some of those taller buildings that are more prominent. But actually, we were quite surprised through the process that people did want to see, North East Cambridge is a really significant, important part that we want to integrate with the city. And as Dan said, we want to use it in a positive sense. It's not just about maximising areas, because we have brought other things down to stop that coalescence and make those buildings hopefully, special and design coded so they are very well controlled. On the people point, I mean, absolutely agree. I feel almost... I'm sort of disappointed that it hasn't come through then in our presentation about the importance of that to us. We really want to take on the responsibility of the district centre that was allocated around this area, being the heart of that district. We've engaged specialist sort of retail amenity F&B consultants at this very early stage to help us try and really think about what that might be. We're even starting sort of meanwhile uses to activate the site before we do any development or even go through planning. Working with a meanwhile charity hub, we're talking to various community organisations about how they can anchor some of those high street uses and sort of help with bringing people onto site, as we suggested. Oh, sorry, I'll pause there.
I have a number of other questions. Councillor Smart, would you mind if I ask you to come back when we've dealt with a few of the other questions, or did you want to follow that up immediately?
I wanted to follow up, but I'll do whatever you want, Chair. Don't mind.
I think we need to keep it relatively brief because of our constrained time on this. I saw Councillor Thornborough next.
Thank you. I've got 3 points and questions. So one is, in our emerging local plan, we have an ambition to have 30% tree cover on any major site. So what I'd really like to know, and these are fully grown trees and making sure that there's space for these. So in due course, it'd be really nice to know how close you are to that within all the areas you have in landscaping, but you don't need to tell me now. But I also think the landscaping-led master plan is a really nice concept and how you place the buildings within this landscape that you're creating for the people there and the neighbours. You talked about mixed use on some of the buildings, and I really think this is a really important way to move forward in the future. And I think in some other schemes where there has been mixed use, there's not been enough, in my opinion, there's not been enough focus on what's happening at ground floor level that the neighbours would benefit from. So it's creating a sort of high street-like space. It's not, there may be some offices coming down to the ground floor, but this will really impact on, Councillor Smart's comments about the weekends and being dead, but it could be that it's not, depending on the high street aspect of it, and that needs to be controlled in a way that really enables people to be there, because rents are so expensive in Cambridge, and that affects that. And finally, just again a comment that I keep raising is about roof lines. For me, it's not so much how high buildings are, but it's the roof line it creates. And when you walk around Cambridge, you've got these wonderful roof lines and details, gargoyles for overflowing and spires and all of these things. So I think so the impact, so that is really important, and that's one thing I will be looking at. So those are really comments rather than questions. Thank you.
Chair, not having to speak, but can I just ask a more meaningful thing on the script, so we can just see what, while we're talking, we've got a more meaningful. Yes, that was helpful. Thank you. That's great.
Thank you. Well, Councillor Thornborough said that those were more comments, but we would welcome a response if you want to respond to that.
I can maybe answer the one in terms of tree canopy cover. So that is a metric that we are constantly keeping an eye on. Obviously, we don't have any, it's not a fixed design yet. We are around, I think, over 20% at the moment, but that will continue to change as we coordinate biodiversity net gain and other kind of landscape metrics. But we are kind of there or thereabouts in terms of that metric. We very much treat the trees as a constraint from the offset, so where there are trees being removed, we're very much looking to retain as many as we can at the edges, and then we're introducing a significant amount of additional new trees as well that gets us close to that percentage.
Thanks for that. Members, I have a number of others who want to ask questions. Can I urge members to perhaps focus on one or two issues so that we can have a more focused response? I think I have next Councillor Khan, then Councillor Bradnam, then Councillor Thornborough. No, I'm sorry, Councillor Porra. Yes, of course. So, beg your pardon. Yes.
Two things. You see the main access off Nuffield Road across the busway. Now, the busway there is not actually a tracked route, so perhaps the regulations won't be as serious as but we've had real problems with crossings of the busway on other parts of the busway. How do you see coping with that crossing? I see that as a potential point of conflict if it's not properly managed, is one issue. Secondly, you although I understand why you wouldn't have residential development in the odour zone, I can imagine that it still would be could be an impact on other urban and commercial uses. You presumably have experience already with the existing situation. I just wondered how much that might impact the viability of whatever is put on outside, and whether it's going to be a problem. I just think you might consider that. And thirdly, very much like the idea of having commercial uses on the ground in the residential area, but I am a little concerned that, and obviously I know that's not actually a planning consideration, but it is a consideration, social consideration, that it should be viable, that there will be enough market to make them viable, and the uses there are viable. Now you'll obviously have to consider the other uses outside the site and whether that's going to make a difference. I just wonder whether you thought about that, and you talked about talking to retailers. I just say it's a concern that if it didn't take off, then it could be a very unattractive area. It actually has to work to be useful.
Emma Ranger, Transport Lead for the project. In terms of the busway crossing, we've been working with the guided busway team at the county, and we are looking to design something that ties in with not just kind of where the access points need to be, but also consider some of those safety implications. We've discussed potential for bringing the speed limit down on this section of the busway as you approach the station, but also how we design a crossing that encourages people to pause before they cross, rather than just enable kind of at speed crossing of the busway, and how that ties into the new bus stop and the kind of the hub that creates as well within the site of activity. So yeah, it is something that we are very aware of, but we are actively looking to make that as viable and as practical as possible within the constraints of that section.
I'll just say on the guided bus crossing as well, I mean, it is critical to achieving kind of our vision for the business park and the vision for North East Cambridge. If you do a really good, our ambition is to have a really good high street, market square, lots of things that would attract communities and people, and if we haven't got an easy way to access it, that will be a major disappointment for the district. We have had very long discussions about the need for that to be a very safe crossing, very well designed, but we think we've got fairly good traction now that the principles of that are understood, so we will be sort of progressing with that. On the comment around the odour zone, I mean, the odour zone is there at the moment. It stretches not just onto our asset, but actually more severely onto St John's Innovation Park, and yet it still provides a good environment for those businesses, for some of the amenity they have on there as well. So we're dealing with that at the moment, and we've had quite good sessions about the nature of the ground floor, the landscape areas, and the commercial areas, and how that could be brought forward in the odour zone, and we're confident that it will still be attractive and sort of work for the market. In terms of the points around the ground floors and will it be a success or not, I mean, North East Cambridge, even if Hartree doesn't proceed, is still going to be a globally significant district. The number of jobs, we've done some very early, roughly speaking, could be 60,000 more jobs on site, which is a really good number for the working week, as we've discussed. But we do want to create those ground floor uses through phases, so probably going to require quite a lot of meanwhile use and some subsidy to get it going, and some proper curation. We've got a big site, so we can, we've got the efficiencies and economies of scale to manage that, and we do that elsewhere in our portfolios. And then as you build up, as the vision for the district comes forward, you will, we've done testing with retail agents and others about movement, footfall, capacity, and we do believe that there is, if we can create the right environment, we will get the customers to make that a commercial offer.
Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your answers so far. I do somewhat echo Councillor Smart's observations. It actually was very hard to see your presentations, but thank you for bringing them anyway. The main things I wanted to speak about are the number of proposed houses and the people that will be brought to the site by being either residential or in employment there. You mentioned 250-bed co-living building. This is the very tall building on Milton Road, and you talked about 190 to 210 homes. I think that was in another building. And I just wanted to consider what that means in terms of the number of people on Milton Road. And I know you also mentioned parking barns on Milton Road, but that will still bring cars around the Milton roundabout and onto Milton Road and down to this site. And all of our local plan and provision, for example, at Waterbeach Newtown, the provision has been, yes, you can build phase 1 if you don't put any more cars onto the A10. There is a trip budget. And I'm just wondering whether you have been asked to comply with any kind of trip budget for this development. The second thing is that whilst I thought your vision for Milton Road looked very pleasant, I just wondered how realistic you feel that is, given that it's actually a busy main route into Cambridge, and whether you think your vision of greenery is going to actually be achievable. The third thing I wanted to raise was your tallest building and the justification for it on the grounds of wayfinding. Personally, this is not for this development, but just as a general statement about, I question the usefulness of tall buildings for wayfinding. Mostly people are navigating at ground level, so I just wanted to observe that. I also note...
Councillor Bradner, could we keep it to just the 3 issues for the moment? Perhaps
yes, I was diverting on that one because I didn't want to be accused of making a comment about this application, which I'm trying to avoid, but just as a general point. So the point there is, do you really need a 15-storey building in that location? Thank you.
Any comments on those points?
Thank you, Councillor Bradnan. In respect of the trip budget, although we are not specifically being asked to hold to a specific budget, we are still working in the principle of that. So the car parking provision on site is capped at 1,000 spaces, and all of the analysis that we have undertaken so far means that in order to manage that cap on spaces, we actually can't exceed the budget numbers that we've been working with. So that obviously requires us to do quite a lot of extra work, not extra work, requires us to consider how people are travelling otherwise, and we are exploring that in terms of discussions with Stagecoach and with the county around what those other modes are and how we implement that. So we are very conscious of the volume of trips on Milton Road and the A10, A14 junction, and minimising any impact on that as far as possible.
Members, do you want to comment on other aspects of that?
Just very briefly,
yes, please.
On Milton Road, the point around how realistic is it and the amount of green space, I mean, we should probably put the existing photo next to it. There's actually with our little chunk of it opposite us, there's a surprising amount of space actually that's just very poorly laid out. And we're also looking at opportunities to take back some of, in some of the road and highway solutions, taking back even more space. It will require multi-stakeholders to buy into that as a solution. But yeah, for that element, it's not tight at all. And there's almost lost space that we think should be given back to sort of nature and biodiversity in that corridor along the cycle route.
Members, I have questions from Councillor Thornborough, Councillor Smith. Are there others? I will come back to those who I rather cut off earlier on. Councillor Porra, yes, I beg your pardon. I don't know why I'm determined to bring you in again, Councillor.
I think we're used to being confused. Thank you very much. I did find the visuals very useful because I think for me it's how I can interpret them best. Just a couple of comments first. Obviously, you mentioned a bus stop. We recently consented Trinity Hall Farm. Obviously, one of the comments we made was that it's a shame there isn't a bus stop there. So I'm assuming that you will be liaising closely with them for when they break through their site onto the busway. I share the concerns about the 15-storey building. I think Merlin Place is very clearly the placemaker and something that's going up and above that, particularly, and I understand about the odour zone and it's heartbreaking you can't put more housing on there, but 15 stories of housing, you know, obviously we're all aware of the issues of tall buildings. I'm struggling to see the design rationale for it being such a different building. I'm not sure we need a corner building there if that's style, particularly as I believe Hartree's maximum parameters were 13 stories and that was residential. I mean, obviously this is, you know, so lower than if it were labs. I think I echo what Councillor Smart says. I think it's a real shame about the housing and I completely understand why you can't do that. But my concern is otherwise at night you will just end up with dead space and you'll end up with people not wanting to walk through it or feeling unsafe. Which, you know, all the business parks, the one at Campbell and the one there, it's not great at night. So I think if you cannot provide housing, you're going to need to be really clear about your CCTV, you know, sight lines, you know, because obviously having green corridors are lovely, but if you're in the middle of a reed bank, you don't have sight lines. So I think I would welcome activation. So things like community classes, you know, having yoga classes there, like something that brings people in. And you can see that's quite successful around King's Cross with the Google low scraper or long scraper, where there are restaurants. So although it is a lot of offices, you feel at night that it's overlooked and much safer. And I think my other questions have been covered by others, so I won't reiterate them. Thank you.
Matt, any comments on that?
I mean, thank you for the feedback on some of the specific points. On your comments around sort of the ground floor and safety and security and activation, we agree, that's the challenge. I mean, I wouldn't compare this to some of the lower density business parks where that's an even, like the old school, what it is today versus what it be in future. I think things like King's Cross are a better comparison than the lower density where security is much more difficult at night time and at weekends.
Councillor Smith, are there, before you come in, any others who want to ask questions? I will have a few myself and then I'll come back to Councillor Smart and maybe one or two others who I'd rather cut off. Councillor Thorne, I've been trying to bring you back in, Councillor Thorne, all the time. Yes. Okay, Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Just a number of matters I'd like to see more about him, more detail. Community building. How's that going to work? What exactly is the contribution? Subsidised workspace incubator. It's a good concept. I'd like to know more about that. I'm a big concern about the impact on the trip budget and to understand that in its wider context. The car parking, cycling infrastructure and the modal split underpinning that, I think will be very important consideration. And also how the Section 106 contributions will address the strategic transport measures that are clearly needed, given that we're on the cusp of the trip budget in North East Cambridge, and also the upgrading of the route from the station. We've got world-class public transport infrastructure. We're going to have a world-class business park, subject to consent. And in between, we've got something that looks like Steptoe's Yard, and that just doesn't work. And I welcome the new guided bus stop route and crossing. That is welcomed. I'd like, so on questions, in the beginning of your presentation, you said that 70% of the site is blighted by the odour zone. And then later on, you said there can't be any residential. So what is it? What are you saying? You'll be answered when I finished. Okay.
Is it just, yeah, so there cannot be residential within the odour zone, but there can be outside the extents of the odour zone? So effectively, where you have 70% odour zone coverage, that area precludes residential land use coming forward. But in the 30% remaining, there is opportunity.
So 30% of the site could be for residential? Yes, yes, okay. And would be interested in seeing how much of that 30% you take up. I think on the tall building, you said that people wanted it. You wanted taller buildings. You did say that, and that's a first for me. I've never heard that before, and I'm interested to know who these people are. I think there's a real risk of you creating a windswept environment. A tall building like that has got real microclimate implications, and I think you need to be really careful to examine the impact of a tall building like that. And I think, like others who have expressed, it would be really helpful if you could give us, send us more of these illustrations so that we can better understand the context. I did struggle trying to understand the context with these presentations, so it would be, I would appreciate that so I can get a better understanding of what you're trying to do here. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, so just to clarify on the consultation feedback, so just statistically in terms of those that have fed back formally, there was a kind of 82% as a number kind of supported the inclusion of a new landmark building in terms of including up to variety and maximising variety across the piece. Charles from Canada might want to add to that.
So just to come back on that, so during November's consultation, we asked a range of questions from respondents, both online and people that came to the events. As kind of outlined, one of the questions asked were, do people support delivering a variety of heights across the master plan? Of the respondents we received, 68% strongly or supported that vision. And then we also asked during that consultation, 82% of respondents supported the inclusion of a new landmark building to anchor the development as a gateway to the innovation district. So that's the direct kind of percentages on the feedback we have received, but obviously.
That's fair enough. That's useful to know, but you didn't actually ask them a direct question on that actually particular proposal, so that will come into the formal consultation when you submit your planning application. And we'll see what people say then.
Right, we're running out of time. I'm going to ask Councillor Toomey Hawkins to come next. I then just want to ask a couple of things myself, and I think we may be a bit out of time. Councillor Smart will forgive me for coming back to those who asked questions previously. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll be very quick. I understand you asked about heights, but I think the point has been made. People walk on the ground. They don't look at how tall a building is to actually be able to make their way. Did you ask if people wanted to see 15-story building? Because yes, they might say they want to see different heights, but I'm sure they will not say they want to see 15-story buildings. So I'd like an answer to that question. And in terms of the point about not being able to put a lot of residential, now obviously there is, Cambridge wastewater owners are trying to update it. The likelihood is there will be a reduction in that odor zone. So I'm hoping that your plans include, I think you referenced it, but there's opportunity to increase the residential aspect of it. Thank you, Chair.
Matt.
I think there's been sort of clear and consistent feedback today on the landmark building. And as I say, it's not where we started. And I think we have consulted heavily in the last two rounds on the nature of the skyline, the landmark building itself. And we haven't hidden, these were the images that we used through consultation to get that feedback. But I think, given the comments today, we'll go away and we'll sort of relook at both the feedback and our response to this discussion today. So thank you for the comments.
Go on then.
Very quickly, you showed us a visual of a combined car park and energy building. And I'm just mindful that Addenbrooke's car park has had a fire recently, and I'm just thinking that you may not wish to combine those two purposes. There are 400 cars that they are trying to get out now because they've had to, because there was a fire. We don't know what caused the fire, but you do not want a fire next to your energy building. So it's just a thought there.
I'm sure that will have been taken on board. Councillor Smart, you wanted to come back again briefly.
I think it'd be useful. I'll be really brief, Chair. So 3 things. Firstly, you never answered my question about how many respondents you had in terms of your percentage results you gave. Second thing is on heights. You answered, when I asked the question, you answered the wrong question. I was making the point about wayfinding. I was responding to what you said. I wasn't saying I don't like tall buildings. So contrary to what others have said in the room, I don't particularly have a strong view one way or the other on tall buildings. They are a discussion point. And I think on the response I got as to part of that, you need to believe in what you present to this committee, not refer to what officers have made you do. You are the applicant, so it's what you want to do. It's important and how you do it. And finally, on housing in the odour zone, I don't know if Philippa Kelly could give any clarification on that. Is that possible or not? Because we've been told it's not possible.
Yes, I think we've had a fair bit of discussion on housing within the odour zone. I think we have had some fairly clear responses on that. So I would suggest we don't press our guests further on that. You may want to comment on some of those points. I was going to come in with a few comments myself, but we're running out of time. I'm sorry, Councillor Khan. So I'll leave my own comments. Did you want to come back on any of these points before we conclude?
Yeah, just to come back on your question there. So over the period from 3 weeks in November, we engaged 115 local residents, members, stakeholders. Of those, 23 submitted a formal feedback form of which that data is based on.
Thank you all very much for your clear explanation, for dealing with some quite awkward questions and comments. I think you've got some messages about what would be helpful to us at the next stages. You can see that in relation to the tall building, in particular the co-living, you may need to look more closely at the justification for that. We're not saying that we would not want you to bring that forward. It's for you to decide what you're going to bring forward and for us to decide when you bring it forward whether it is suitable for approval. But we appreciate the enormous amount of work that's going into this, particularly on the consultation. It's far more extensive than we are used to. We appreciate things like the early bringing forward of the LVIAs. Just a brief comment from myself, I said I wouldn't, but I think when you look at the viewpoints, for instance, you had one from the round church, I think, you can see in there a number of buildings which may not be nearly as high as those you're bringing forward, but have very distinctive roofscapes that contribute to Cambridge as it is. And I think it is not just the height of the buildings, but also the way that they look that will be important when you come back at the next stage. Thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate all your efforts. We'll then draw that to a close and we'll reconvene in 5 minutes to give our next developers a chance to prepare. Welcome back to, just for the record, our meeting of the Joint Development Management Committee on 17th of December. We come to item 5, which is our pre-application developer briefing, Darwin Green. I think we can all agree you only want to hear me once at a time, so we'll just... Yes. Our pre-application developer briefing on Darwin Green phases 2 and 3, Cambridge Road, Impington. Just before we get started, if you would, I just want to welcome to the meeting. I won't ask all the members to introduce themselves. They did earlier. You can see nameplates. Welcome to the meeting, Councillor Corin Garvey, who's here on this occasion as a substitute, and also, of course, Elizabeth. I'm sorry, Elizabeth. Glover, of course. Elizabeth Glover as the principal planner in this case. The process of the briefing will be, we'll invite our developers to present for up to 25 minutes, and then members of the committee will be able to ask questions, also for up to 25 minutes, members. And I think, Matt Jarvis, would you like to introduce your team? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name's Matt Jarvis. I am Technical Director at Rural Solutions and Chartered Landscape Architect, and have been involved in Darwin Green for many, many years. And as part of the team, I have to my left Scott Darrington, who is the engineer on the scheme, who has also been working on Darwin Green for many, many years. We've also got Alison from Bidwells, who is the Chartered Planner, and also developer representation from Barrett's, which is Sam Coleman.
Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share a presentation.
Could we ask that you use a laser pointer marker for when if you are pointing out anything on your presentation?
I don't have one.
Are you planning to mark anything out or point to anything? Perhaps not. If not...
Don't worry, we'll cope.
Not.
Thank you for that suggestion, Councillor Bradnam. Please go ahead.
Right. So, thank you very much for this opportunity to come and present the Darwin Green Phases 2 and 3 infrastructure RMA. This is a point in time. We've gone through various detailed pre-apps so far. We're not complete. We've still got some further work to do. So we want to present where we're at today and to gain your thoughts and feedback so we have time to address any comments. So the team, as you can see there, Bidwells Rural Solutions, Wood Hardwick, Hawley and FPCR. The majority of these have been involved in Darwin Green for many years, who have got very good historical background and knowledge of the site. So there are 3 key themes that underpin this application, and these are the need for the primary road, there is drainage, and there's hard and soft landscape proposals. The primary road includes details of the primary street, including footways and cycleways and the wider infrastructure connectivity. There is drainage included, which includes a variety of SUDS detention basins, which link towards the country park, which I'll go on to in a minute, and a range of SUD swales, rain gardens associated with the streets and the green corridors. Added to this is a layer of hard and soft landscape proposals, and they cover the open space, areas of public realm within the RMA application, areas of play. There are some need to identify vegetation removal as a wider requirement of the RMA and the wider phase 2-3 works, and other works including some earthworks, land raising, pumping station and utilities. We've included a quick timeline here to show where we're at. So we obviously obtained outline planning permission in September 24. Since then, we've started the process around kind of summertime this year with pre-app with the officers. We've undergone 3 so far, so we are on this journey. We're not complete yet. We've still got public consultation to go through and further landscape design and highways pre-app. I should also add that the design code is being twin-tracked at the same time. So the design code started early in the 25 process. We're still going through that. We're towards the end of that. That will be submitted hopefully in March 2026, with then the idea that the infrastructure RMA will follow shortly after. The master plan on the screen currently shows the illustrative landscape master plan that was approved at Outline. So we just wanted to show that as a recap. This includes the country park that wraps around the wider development area, and also the development parcels, which is up to 1,000 homes, includes the infrastructure, which we will talk about today, and also 2 new schools, a primary school and a secondary school, along with the need for sports pitch provision, which is subject to a separate application. I just wanted to put a slide in that explains the red line boundary, because I appreciate it's a little bonkers, and what we needed to do at this stage was identify not only the primary corridor for the infrastructure, we needed to pick up new and redundant utilities as part of the initial works, along with the ponds towards the country park, which serve the strategic drainage for the development site, along with vegetation removal. So that's why we've got quite an odd-shaped red line boundary. And this page kind of splits out the 3 key themes from landscape, highways and drainage, with the ponds, the drainage running through the green corridors, the highway being primarily through the kind of U shape that wraps around through the middle of the development, and then the landscape spaces that join it all together. This is a master plan of the site-wide proposals. So this shows the green corridors, the infrastructure at quite a high level, so I appreciate you can't see the detail yet, and we'll run through that. But it shows the strategic location between the A14 to the north, which is, if you can just see it, that bit there. We've got DG1, which is the first phase, to the south here, and then how this infrastructure phase kind of ties in with the existing access road into Franklin Gardens, part of DG1, and then how it also provides access further down by the school, which will go on to the detail. I'll pass over to my colleague who will talk you through the connectivity.
So as a result of the workshops with officers through both the design code and the infrastructure reserve matters applications, we've gone through and identified what we believe to be all the connecting routes to and from the development to the wider active travel routes and how the site sits within the surrounding area. So this includes routes to Cambridge North to the northeast, Girton to the west, along with routes to Huntington Road to the south via Darwin Green Way, with potential future links across the A14 and to Wellbrook Way via the country park. We've also looked at how people will navigate within the development in general to access the country park, public open space, community facilities, schools, as well as the wider strategic networks and the parcel interconnectivity. So in doing this, footways and cycleway routes have been provided along the primary street with suitable crossing facilities proposed throughout, either as parallel crossings, priority crossings and shared crossing facilities to help promote sustainable and active travel methods. And this slide just kind of shows that where we've identified those key routes to be in terms of cycles. And then the next slide is the same but for pedestrians. Yeah, next slide. So we've kind of come along to the main junctions coming into the Darwin Green development as a whole. So in line with the approved plans as part of the outline consent, we are removing the on-streets eastbound dedicated cycleway and replacing it with a bi-directional cycleway adjacent to the footway. The westbound on-street cycleway will be retained. This will enable cyclists to access the shared footway cycleway on Cambridge Road and use the crossing facilities to go towards Cambridge North. For the more confident cyclists, a link is provided from the bi-directional cycleway down to the road and its on-road cycle network along Cambridge and Histon Road. As you kind of come more towards the site access, we have a new vehicular access junction off Franklin Gardens, and we're providing a new parallel crossing across that, as well as one to the south, just to help cycle and active mode transport connectivity throughout. So these links will provide connectivity to the bi-directional cycleway that runs through the primary street all the way around through to Girton and to the schools. We are still having discussions through the pre-app workshops, and Highways have recently identified that they would still like design lines down towards Darwin Green 1, and it's just something that we're still exploring at the moment and how we are to achieve that. And then lastly, the secondary connection, the western connection down towards Galton Road, adjacent to the primary schools. This is just a continuation of the existing road that's already been constructed as part of the Darwin Green 1 development that goes through, as well as connecting the bi-directional cycleway to the orbital cycleway that forms part of Darwin Green 1, as well as the footpath connection into the Darwin Green 1 and the public right-of-way connections.
Moving on to the detail, we felt it easier to present a sequence of drawings which provided members the opportunity to see how the spaces are being shaped. And this design approach has been developed alongside a significant amount of consultation with officers and drilling down into the detail in terms of connectivity, character, climate change, sustainability, and placemaking.
Just on this, bear in mind that we won't be able to read a lot of the script on here, so you might like to highlight one or two bits.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
The idea of the notes in there is obviously the pack is issued beforehand, and those members who want to drill down to the detail as to what's going on, the notes are there to provide a level of description, and also throughout this pack we've identified a number of sustainable principles, which is this green S, that provides key sustainable ideas that we're looking to integrate. Staying on the sustainability, the sustainable features such as rain gardens included in areas of hard space work very well from a drainage point of view, but also a placemaking and helping with climate change. The idea that the highway infrastructure has been designed to ensure not only connections along the length of the road, but also how the parcels connect with one another. In particular, where we are here in terms of the secondary school location, we have a larger kind of hard space to deal with a large footfall, particularly at school start and end times, along with addressing the primary school to the north as well. So we feel that there are good connections, ability to increase dwell time, and also provide things like cycle parking, and also the flexibility to work with the schools team and how they might want to influence the threshold boundary, which I believe the designs aren't quite there yet, but they are starting to look at the design of the schools. So that will be something that we'll need to do. So really the kit of parts that we've used as part of the design ethos is integrating SUDs within the landscape, that we know we've got to drain the road infrastructure network, but also making sure that we have a really strong landscape character all the way through. And this thread, as you'll see, will weave all the way through these spaces. What these pages do is they take you round in a clockwise direction around the road, and gives a sense of how we are addressing not only the road infrastructure, but we have an emergent testing layout and how the residential parcel can help influence our connectivity and the spaces that we create. For example, here shows an example of a leap play area and a lap combined to provide a play space which is protected through hedgerow planting and railings along the road edge, and also picking up this need for good levels of clear pedestrian and cycle links, which are picked out through raised tables along the way. The raised tables helping to control motor vehicle speed and also to highlight where those crossing points are. We've adopted an informal approach to the planting through this space to help combine with elements like street lighting, so we're not overly reliant on strong avenues of trees which become eroded once the detail is applied in terms of utilities and the kind of those kind of elements later on. And as we move forward, we wanted to show some examples of how the spaces would work from a three-dimensional point of view. The land raising, so these are not just flat spaces where we've got the space in terms of the POS, the public open space, and also play areas where we're introducing mounding, planting, tree planting, to really help shape and provide that character to the infrastructure, and also helping to make sure that it doesn't become a windswept avenue where people don't want to be. Moving forward, as we go further north, we've ensured that where we have swales, that they don't become a barrier to connectivity, and that we are culverting the swales and making sure that we've got good, strong connective points between residential parcels and how they can connect into the wider street network at sensible locations, along with a bus stop location controlled through raised tables where crossing points are provided. As we move further north, we head towards the community square, which is adjacent to what will be the community building, which will come forward in a separate reserve matters application. We have a series of complex movements which we have looked to simplify and identify clear strategies for cycle movement, which is that kind of pinky red surface, along with how we deal with conflict through pedestrian and cycle movements, where we create little events, which are changes of materials within the streetscape, and allowing pedestrian and cycle movements to carry on without too much conflict. We should also say that this layout has been heavily coordinated with the engineering layout in terms of easements and connectivity and pipe runs, and that the swales have been designed to a reasonably shallow depth, which we can go on to later on, and to avoid an overly engineered approach. So it was very much landscape-led to begin with, and looking at integrating the constraints as we went on. As we move through the spaces, we've got a good indication of where play areas will be in terms of laps. So there's lap here, lap in that central area by the community centre, and one further up. So we start to establish an approach to play, which is like play along the way. And as we move further round, this shows the 3D arrangement again, where we've got the primary street and then the green spaces either side, to make sure that we are working really hard to avoid open and exposed kind of road corridors, where we can really focus on the humanistic scale, wayfinding, and trying to provide an engaging space as people travel through it. As we go further round, the infrastructure provides key connectivity to green links, which then have onward connectivity to the country park. The components are very similar in terms of we still require open swales, bridge links, and also crossing points which link green corridors within the parcel, separate to a separate application, but making sure that we've got good connectivity along it. Moving on. Again, we wanted to show that there is a spatial arrangement and awareness of spaces between buildings. So this corridor begins to narrow slightly here, but we do have segregated cycle and pedestrian connectivity along with a shared route on the northern side. This corridor shows the location of what will be the pumping station. We've got play area integrated along with good pedestrian design lines and connectivity through the space. We feel we've got a good level of planting through here to really create a sense of place and to ensure that it becomes an attractive space to be in. Again, the 3D arrangement shows the kind of depth of the swales, which are reasonably shallow. We have bridge connections across those swales so they don't become a barrier to pedestrian connectivity, along with play areas and engaging areas of landscape with changes in landform. As we go through, we have further connective points towards the country park, which link the infrastructure and help to promote cycle and pedestrian connectivity. Again, 3D arrangement of bridge connections and how the swales can be planted up and linked with the green space. And then as we come back round towards the main spine road, we have a similar set of components in terms of dedicated cycleway, shared pedestrian and cycleway to the north, and also the swales, planting, and a good level of connectivity across into each of the parcels. Again, shows the depth of the swale and crossing points and the relationship with the road. And then as we get to the main junction, Scott has also mentioned how this arrangement works in terms of tying into DG1 to the south and also into the Spine Road connection to the north. And as we go further around, it shows the relationship through the country park to the north and the avenue arrival Spine Road there. And then to finish up, I wanted to just highlight the fact that we've got 3 strategic ponds to the north, how the ponds link with the green corridors that take you from the infrastructure northwards into the green corridor and provide not only attenuation but links to kind of high levels of recreation value and amenity within the country park. And that's a quick 3D to show the relationship with the pond, the award drain, and then what will be the bund towards the A14 under a separate application. Thank you very much.
Matt, thank you very much. Perfectly timed. Members, I suggest that this time we confine ourselves to 2 issues at a time when asking questions so that we can get sort of focused responses and hopefully get through all the members here wanting to ask questions. I think I see Katie Thornborough wants to start us off. Can I just see an indication of others? Yes, I thought so. Right.
Okay, I have
Councillor Thornborough.
2 points and questions. On one of the slides, you showed a leap and a lap integrated with a SUDS drainage. And I think Anna Bradman's not here, but there...
She is.
Oh, yeah.
She just moved.
Yeah, sorry. So we've had experience of this in the past where it's been really unsuccessful. And what happened was the SUDS drainage actually kind of, at times, it was so successful that the leap and the lap couldn't be used. And there was a real concern about safety of children using that. And in the end, it had to be separated. We had to take the leap and the lap out of the SUDS drainage. So my experience of that integration is not good, and that sort of had a red alarm sort of ringing in my head. And then the other one, you showed the pumping station, and I just wondered if you'd thought about any noise and vibration that might come from that for the nearby houses. Yeah, thanks.
I'll take the first question there about the LAP and the SUDS areas. what we've got on screen here is an example. I might just, oh no, I'm not going to be able to get up, am I? Yeah, Scott will just point out some features. So, in this space, we do need some drainage elements, and there's a small suds basin to the north and to the south. What we've done is we've ensured that the majority of the play is outside of that, where we have tried to create these suds features as a part of the setting and not necessarily just a play feature in themselves. Now, that's not to say that we're not encouraging children to still appreciate the drainage principles and also the idea of water. They won't fill up particularly high because the way that we've designed these, that we are under draining these features so they don't become particularly deep and problematic from that point. The idea is that they would be planted, they would have some a kind of wildflower meadow around the edge, so they end up becoming a habitat feature, and that we're not necessarily saying that the children will be running in and out of them. What
I think now you've explained it, it's fine. It's not integrated into one footprint for both.
Yeah, okay, I'll stop there.
Right, thank you. I have next Councillor Bradnam, Councillor Smith. I know there are other hands. We'll come back to them. Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, actually, I welcome the principle that you're starting from the landscape. I think that's very helpful, and it gives a clear indication of where there's going to be green space, which is good. So my questions lie around whether this illustrates wonderfully. You're planning to put a lot of trees in. Now, the concern I have is with long-term maintenance and whether these will be the responsibility of the Highways Authority, and that there is a road going through here, isn't it? It's not just cycle paths. So it's just be mindful of the long-term maintenance of the trees. And also on your diagram where we showed the cross-sectional view, you showed a single-decker bus, but actually double-decker buses tend to hit the canopy of trees that are very close to the highway. So you just might want to think about either what species you're planting or how close to the carriageway you're putting them. The other one I wanted to ask about was for permeability. I'm glad you're thinking about permeability with DG1, but could you also please do some work to look at work with the landowners to the north, because it's going to be really important that people have access to the land. I know there aren't any public rights of way over that land, but if you could negotiate with the landowners there that they might consider some kind of public access, because you know, there's going to be a lot of people living here and they'll want to use green space, and you've got a lovely country park that you're planning, a country park that you're planning, and I think that's a very good thing. But the permeability, certainly across the A14 on the accommodation bridge, that would be great if that could be managed. Thank you. But it's really just words of warning about trees, really.
If I just come back on the adoption, I think the Highways Authority have been clear, unless the tree or planting provide a clear highway function, it might be that narrowing, for example, to control vehicular speed, they would not be adopting trees per se. They will be adopting the road infrastructure and also the cycle and the key pedestrian links. Other than that, they won't be adopting large areas of public open space. The areas of public open space will be offered to the city for adoption, so they control that, and any areas that fall outside of that will be a management company. We don't foresee a large amount of management company maintenance here. There may be some pockets that relate more closely to parcels, but that level of maintenance is probably yet to be determined, so we're kind of early on in that kind of looking at what areas. I take on board the species, absolutely, and we will go back and look at the impact on double-decker buses, so that's a really good comment, so thank you very much. And in terms of trees, yes, there are a lot of trees. some of these trees may just be large shrubs, so you might get multi-stem Wilegia, for example, that could be a small tree, so perhaps it could appear to be slightly more tree than it is. We want to make sure that we create an informal, naturalistic character as much as possible, and we see trees being a really key landscape feature in these spaces. But we will be mindful of maintenance and who will be maintaining those.
The cost of long-term maintenance that I'm concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, and then I'll ask Councillor Porrer after that.
Okay. Thank you. When you come back, thank you for the presentation. When you come back on this in respect of active travel routes, I'd like to see more about the connectivity to DG1 and wider neighbourhoods. And I think Councillor Brennan just raised that. Width matters. Width matters. These routes are very successful in Eddington, but value engineering dictates short-term profit or cost cutting, but it's actually long-term destruction of value of these routes. And the reason is they need to be wide enough for all users to enjoy. This is one of the great pleasures of living in Cambridge, is we have these routes, these network routes. But if they're too narrow, people are in fear of being run down by people who misuse these routes. So wider, make sure we have wider routes than we're previously seeing would be quite an attractive thing to do. On the primary road, you mentioned traffic calming, and what I would encourage is that the traffic calming does ensure the 20 mile an hour speed limit. This is a lesson from BDW1, where the speed limit is 20 mile an hour speed limit is exceeded wildly by residents. The community building, I think it would be positive to reconsider the location in comparison to where the community assets are already and where the if you like, the centre of gravity of the population, the rest of the population is. And one thought is that it actually could be a destination asset for the country park and a cafe or something like that combined with that, and that would support its financial viability in the long term. So that's one to think about. My key disappointment there is the retention ponds and the proximity of housing have pushed narrowed the country park to a point where it's practically split in two. And I think that's disappointing, because I think the country park is one of the most exciting things of the whole Darwin Green development. And I think we should be able to see that it's one piece, not something that's in two parts. And if you are going to have the housing so close to the A14, then I think this committee would want to see how the impact would be mitigated. So there's a comment. I don't think there's too many questions there, but just comments. Thank you.
Matt, do you want to respond to some of that? We don't expect you to answer all of the questions, some of which are clearly comments.
Yeah, so kind of going on so we've looked at the connectivity to Darwin Green 1. We provide the accesses where we can. We do have to raise the ground to Darwin Green 2 and 3 in comparison to Darwin Green 1. So there are limited opportunities, but we've provided them where we can. And that will come forward as part of the future reserve matters for those parcels adjacent to those to make sure that they're there. In terms of width for the active travel routes, we've had 2 highways pre-app effectively to kind of discuss the widths of the cycleways and footways to make sure that they are sufficient widths. We've gone through those conversations. In terms of the traffic calming along Primary Street, similar to what we did on Darwin Green 1, but hopefully a bit more, hopefully we'll be able to get speeds to 20 miles an hour. Through highways, they've requested that we have the traffic calming feature every 50 metres, and we've done that through the raised tables, through road narrowings, through the provision of parallel crossings, and all these features are set at those spacings or slightly closer together where possible to kind of help maintain that design speed of 20 miles an hour. In terms of the community building, I think this is where it's been allocated as part of the parameter plans, and I think that position is pretty much more or less set, as it were, in that location. And in terms of the attenuation ponds, appreciate it, take that, your points on board. As part of to provide the development where there's an award drain that runs through the development, and to be able to accommodate that, we're having to reroute or realign the existing award drain, and that kind of acts as a little bit of that barrier as such, and we've tried to work within that without impacting too much. But we can take on your board your comments for that as part of the Country Park Reserve Matters, which is a separate application.
Thank you. Councillor Katie Porra.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I was going to talk about traffic calming, but you've covered that. I would note, obviously, you're still building out, so it would be a real shame to build all these amazing roads with trees and then have 10-ton trucks going over the route protection area and destroying them, because you do see on some of the new carriageways where big vehicles have just destroyed it. So I'm sure you'll be mindful of that when you're looking at your construction management. The other thing, you mentioned right at the start, so you said you've got 2 small ponds that are going and then they're in effect being replaced with 2 bigger ponds. Did I understand that right on the first slide? I just wanted to ask a little bit more. It said something about replacing ponds and removing vegetation. Could you just confirm, so the ones you're removing, are they currently in use but will then be replaced? How are you phasing them? We're not going to end up with a situation where we don't have the ponds that we need for the whole site. Thank you.
So in terms of removal, there aren't any ponds that are being removed. So the vegetation removal associated with the red line, so it's that one.
There was one with labels on right at the start. Realign.
That one?
Removal of existing vegetation and smaller attenuation pond. Are you not removing that pond then? Do you see the top right?
So, oh, right, yes. So we're not actually removing that. We are, we are proposing that as a third attenuation pond. So we've actually got 4. So we've got a DG1 relocated pond near the Spine Road, which is there. And then we have 3 that are coming forward as part of the drainage strategy. I think that's really just a note to say that there's vegetation removal to allow for the pond to be formed, because we know we've got there's some hedgerow which is grown out and not managed, so we need to clear that to be able to get that pond in to help drain that other side of the parcel, because we can't drain that kind of eastern edge of the parcel into those 2 ponds, because they're already working very hard for the rest of the development.
Okay. Councillor Martin Carn.
I'm particularly interested in this because it happens to be in my ward, and the area. I more want to comment on the country park elements which were related, and obviously will also be related to your future presentations. I'm particularly I concur with Councillor Smith about the ponds being close and the potential division. They're also important as a feature, but I'm a bit worried that it might split up the park too much. I'm particularly interested in the role of the park, which will be not just a feature for Darwin Green, it will be for the whole of North Cambridge. It will be quite very significant role in that sense. It will serve both Arbury, King's Hedges, the new Orchard Park development, and Girton, the parts of Girton adjoining it. So to be a much wider scale, and therefore the role of any building related to that is important. I've raised before the issue of Impington Farm, which had permission, prior approval to demolish, which has not been demolished. It has significant historic interest. It was the last farm from the enclosure period in about 1806. It's also, apparently was once a prize-winning farm, so it has historic interest and is well approached and well accessible. I think you need to think about how you use that. I've always liked the idea of having a city farm. We don't have one in Cambridge, but that depends upon finding somebody to manage it. But there is a real potential there which could be taken up if it could be linked in. I'm a bit concerned about a sort of grey area which is marked next to the woodland, because if you're going to have a farm or some feature there, you're going to, I'm not sure whether that's meant to be a water feature or what you're planning to do with it. You're going to need some area. It's unusual in this area that it's a little area with the hedges, and therefore the comment about removing the hedges might also be, there's a bit of a, you want to make sure that if they're taken, they need to be, something's been stated that the role is fitted, because that's an unusual feature in the area and could be something to build on. The Impington Farms also has high accessibility, that area. So there's a potential there for a wider, for a centre for wider features, perhaps not just for Darwin Green. So those are thoughts I have about that. The only other concern I do...
Councillor Khan, that seems to be quite a range of things to be addressed. Did you want to add another question?
I was only going to comment that I'm a little bit concerned that the water discharge through to might affect areas north of the A14. I don't quite know how it works, so I just want to make sure that that's been considered.
Any response on those points?
Yeah, I can pick up the response to the grey area that sits outside of this application. So if you can see my cursor there, that was the grey area that I think you believe. Yeah. So the idea that it would be a depression landscape, that would be a wet kind of woodland, if you like, but a wet area of planting that would act as a little bit of overflow. It's there as a feature, it's there as a habitat. There isn't one on the site, and what we were looking to do was just try and vary that habitat because it was located quite nicely next to a ditch there. So we felt there was an opportunity there to maximise that kind of habitat. The idea is that the application for the country park would have a path around it that wouldn't be flooded, that this area would just be a kind of a wet, boggy area. That's a feature that we would look to include. In terms of the Impington Farm, again, this is outside of this scope of here, but we can take that away, and when we start looking at the country park, we can chew over that and look at what can be done about that. And I think that will be a wider discussion with the development team.
Right. I'm going to call Councillor Garvey in a minute. Councillor Garvey, you'll forgive me for you weren't here earlier on when I took the opportunity to remind members to advise them against saying anything that might imply predetermination. Also, I'm conscious that you didn't get the opportunity to declare any interest should you wish to do so, bearing in mind that we're not taking any decisions today. I suspect this may also be parts of it within your ward as well, am I right? Is part of this within your ward? Yes.
Yes. Yes, I'm a ward councillor for Girton Ward. And I just wanted to ask about the passageway into Wellbrook Way from to the country park. That was proposed some time ago. Did I hear you talking about it earlier? Could you expand on that?
The connections into the boundary along the edge of Girton, so if you can see my cursor there, actually, oh yeah, connective points, sorry, here. The intention is very much still to connect into Wellbrook Way. We can provide the path network up to the edge of our site, and that we believe, I think Taylor Wimpey own that bit of land, and I believe that discussions are still ongoing. So it becomes, I think, a legal matter from just how we do it. But the intention is very much that we join positively with the existing residents so they get the benefit of the country park access. That same principle would be applied to Thornton Way and also Thornton Close to show that we've got 3 connective points along that boundary to really ensure that local residents that exist, that they can gain that access.
Now, any other members who haven't yet had an opportunity to ask anything or make any comments? Councillor Thornbrook, please.
I think Councillor Smith asked about the location of the community centre and how it might support the country park. I know we have wonderful Hobson's Park in South Trumpington, and the Clay Farm Centre is the nearest community centre to that, but some distance away. So, but that's now very successful. But the relationship of the community centre to the park, I think, is a really important point and worth considering. Yeah.
Don't think any comment is necessary on that. For myself, I just want to echo what Councillor Garvey was saying. I think it's always been important, I think I'm right in saying to the people of Girton in particular, that the green corridor is maintained so far as possible. This country park will clearly be important in that. I think we're impressed with what you've said in terms of the sustainability, particularly of the landscape and so on. We will, of course, in due course, be looking closely at sustainability of the construction as well. And no doubt you will come to that and have that all in hand. A fair bit of the focus inevitably today has been on cycle paths, and that we have this situation, which I think Councillor Smith referred to increasingly in Cambridge and the surrounding villages, where paths that used to be used by cyclists going fairly steady speed now have not only cyclists going anything between 5 and 25 miles an hour, but also electric bicycles, electric cargo bikes, electric tricycles now, hopefully going at less than 15.5, but not all of them. Plus we have sometimes on or close to the same routes, walkers with dogs on extending leads and so on. So it is becoming more of a conflict zone, even if we can get people off the roads. And I think I get the impression that is something you have very much in mind in the way you manage your cycle paths. Right. No further comments needed, I think, on that. Thank you very much for coming along and making that, that presentation. It's been extremely helpful to us, and we look forward to seeing more at the next stages in due course.
I just want to say thank you very much for your comments, and thank you, Speaker.
Thanks. Members, we will again take a 5-minute break so that the, our next developers can set up. So we'll meet again at 12:15. Good to go. Right, thank you. Welcome back to this meeting of the Joint Development Management Committee. Just for the record online, this is the Wednesday, 17th of December. And we come to item 6 of our agenda today, which is another pre-application developer briefing. And this one relates to the former NIAB HQ. Huntingdon Road. The process will be developers are invited to speak for 25 minutes. Members of the committee will then be able to ask questions for up to 25 minutes. Members, you may be interested to know that the contractors who are working on the building intend to start again at 1 o'clock, just to warn you, but I have asked them to hold off for a few minutes, but we'll see. So I'm going to ask Peter McCowan to introduce your colleagues, please, but welcome to you all.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. I'm Peter McCune. I'm a partner in the planning team at Carter Jonas, and I'm leading on the planning side of things here. Emma, do you and Dave want to introduce yourselves?
Hello everyone, afternoon. My name is Emma Armstrong. I'm a partner at JTP Architects, and we are the architects for this development.
And hi, Dave Swindles, associate at JTP.
Right, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you all for giving us the opportunity to come and present to you this morning. As some of you will be aware, the former NIAB site benefits from having a planning permission granted in 2024 for a mixed-use scheme comprising build-to-rent accommodation and a part hotel alongside other uses. There are viability issues with a consented scheme, and we are now looking to progress revised proposals for the site. We're looking to introduce a range of residential uses comprising build-to-rent, co-living and purpose-built student accommodation. We are engaged in pre-application discussions with your officers, and we also have a planning performance agreement in place. The main purpose of this afternoon's presentation is to introduce the concept of co-living to members. I will now hand over to our design team, and following the presentation, we would welcome any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. We've got quite a lot of information in this pack, and I'm worried 25 minutes is quite a short amount of time. So Peter's introduced that there is an existing consent on the site, and we've worked on this for the guts of 8 years now. So we were really pleased with where we got to in 2021, and great that it got consented, signed Section 106, but obviously the world's kind of evolved in that time through the way we live, but most importantly, economically. And so we have to really start to rethink about these kind of new ways of living, and we're doing this both in Cambridge, but we work kind of nationally, so we're very much doing this in and around London, Bath, Bristol, Manchester, everywhere, really to think about a kind of affordability of how people work, but also kind of social connectivity too, really trying to combat urban loneliness. And so we're trying to evolve these ways of thinking, and so we want to come to you today and start to introduce the idea of potentially some co-living development on this site. So there's, as I've said, we kind of introduce where we were, and I'll now fully go into more just kind of the co-living side of things. We got a bit about the site at the end, but I think we'll focus on this portion for our 25 minutes. As I've mentioned, we're really looking at kind of blended ways of living. We want to create a kind of range of housing options and offers for the people, not only of Cambridge, but kind of wider context as well. Traditional housing models are kind of failing at the minute. People just can't afford to live there, but also, you're looking to kind of meet lots of new people and also think about kind of affordability and also cost certainty. And that's why with both build to rent, co-living and also PBSA, providing that kind of range of offer for the people of Cambridge is really important. So we've been exploring this, and we've been doing lots of kind of designing of it, seeing it come to fruition, seeing it get built, but also lots of research. It's constantly evolving as even a model. And this started 10 years ago, and from where it was then to where it is now is completely different, and we're going through kind of a multitude of generations of it. So you have to kind of keep learning and keep exploring and to keep things kind of fresh. So a bit of introduction to it. It's a modern purpose-built rental model. It's really evolved from the BTR model, but actually it's a lot more about kind of different ways of people coming together and having a lot more shared amenities. So you'd have your own private space, but then lots of the amenities are shared, and we've been looking at different ways that you might use these spaces, and Dave will talk about that a bit more. But it's all about inclusivity. This is a model that you come and you pay a lump sum for 1 month, and that has everything included in it. That's your bills, your council tax, your rent, everything just as one. So that cost certainty is really important. I think most importantly as well, it's really about community. I think a lot of people live in HMOs across the city and most cities, but actually these are actually really low quality and there's not a great kind of social connectivity with that. And so actually getting people into these more modern, more established, higher quality ways of living really promotes that social connectivity. And we've got a few kind of facts and figures here, but there's a real increase in this across the UK. I think at the minute we've got about 9,000 co-living units in the UK, but they reckon by 2028 it's going to be 20,000. So it's really increasing year by year, and you can see one of the stats here, there's 87 increase from 2023. So what's driving the demand? As said, the housing cost and availability. We all know there's a housing crisis in this country. So what we can do to actually make this more available for lots of people. Lots of people are still living at home, but actually this is a model will get people out of the home and into a new kind of establishing their own kind of way of living outside of the family home. I said the alternative to HMOs, and I'm going to kind of drive this home, is kind of really important. I think that kind of lack of quality in living conditions that people are living in, it's just not a good way to live. House shares isn't actually that sociable. And so we find that these HMOs are cramming lots of people into spaces and not necessarily having kind of living spaces for people to come to together. So this kind of alternative option is really important. And I think with these models as well, there's a real drive for kind of safety and security. It's about animation, it's about having a 24-hour concierge, someone there to really look after you, which you don't get with these shared models when you're potentially living with strangers. Social opportunities, co-living is really about bringing people together. It's about having your own private space, but actually you have the choice then to branch out, to go eat with people, to go watch TV, to get together and play some games. And so there's that option is there, and that kind of choice is really important. And the cost certainty that I've spoken about, that simplicity of just paying one kind of lump sum every month. So the target market tends to be around kind of 20 to 40, but actually when we were doing this research, you do get people from kind of 19 up into 72, was one of the places we spoke to the other day. They've got a resident 72 that's been there for 5+ years. So there's a real kind of range of people living there, but it's real targeted at young professionals, postgrads, key workers is a big one, people working in kind of alternative hours, actually having people who work in the same industries living all together is really important. So there is a kind of diverse range of people that this is targeted at. And I mentioned that generation, how it's kind of changing, from Gen 1 co-living to Gen 3, it's constantly evolving and we're constantly learning and moving with the times of how people live. So these are some key benefits, but I think I've touched on most of them. I think pushing the kind of developer side of it is actually a really good model for regeneration. We find lots of these sites that aren't viable for traditional housing or even kind of BTR. Bringing in this blended offer is really important and actually get sites off the ground and making the sites deliverable. There's a lot of sites that sit there and they have planning permission, they're just not getting built. So actually we want to speed up that delivery, and it's really important. And it's a really sustainable way of building. There's a kind of an efficiency to the way it's built and it's designed, but actually that kind of people are using these spaces all the time, so it's really kind of socially sustainable, but also kind of environmentally and economically sustainable as well. I'll pass over to Dave.
Thanks, Emma. Briefly touching, I guess, on policy and guidance, and I think the sort of first thing to say is at the moment there isn't any sort of nationwide guidance in terms of co-living, but there's a lot of different regions and boroughs and local authorities that are starting to put some in place. In London, we've seen some guidance, London LPG come out in the last 12 months, which sets various standards on spaces and other provisions within that, and they're probably the most developed. And we know that there's some early guidance coming through in Cambridge in terms of the emerging local plan. But we've been obviously doing, as part of our work and on our work elsewhere, we've been looking at policies around the country and benchmarking with other schemes as well, looking at sizes and spaces that would be provided within these schemes. And as we say, what's really important is, alongside the private spaces, making sure there's that quantity of shared space and shared amenity. So, yeah, the real key thing for this is the shared component. So as Emma said, everyone will have their own private studio within a development, but then there's a much bigger than average, compared to build to rent or something else, provision of amenity spaces. And this is really the attraction for a lot of these schemes. So they're really attractive. We've got colleagues who've just recently moved to London and moved into these schemes because it gives them an opportunity to meet people. They're moving into a new city, a new place. It's a chance to make friends, and often when we've visited schemes, we've spoken to people who've lived in these for 6 months, a year, made friends, and then moved out into perhaps more traditional forms of rented accommodation. So the social aspect is really important. Location is important, being fairly central in an urban environment. And again, that cost certainty that we've talked to, again, for people perhaps moving into their first own accommodation, having that cost certainty every month and being able to budget is really important. Emma sort of touched, I guess, on sort of various challenges these days, and loneliness is one that we come across. So again, the idea that we can create these spaces which provide the spaces to come together, but also provide a program of activities. Often there's usually quite a lot of sort of management in terms of putting on events, using these spaces both sort of formally and informally. So whether that's kind of screenings or dinners together, parties, different activities like that. They're really seeing that these can actually help to really combat loneliness. And then when we touch on some of these spaces, we're looking at different ideas such as lounges, such as gyms, slightly more just informal encounter spaces, shared kitchens where people can cook together, can eat together, can make their meals, as well as spaces that are provided within the private studios for doing that. And as we said there, some facts about sort of meeting new people and perhaps moving out and then making new friends and joining together to live together. So typically, co-living developments will include communal kitchens, lounge spaces, gyms, co-working areas, and particularly with increasing working from home, that's become a big challenge. People not just going to want to work on their sort of kitchen table at home. So actually the co-working spaces are really important in co-living, and providing for social different spaces. And actually we found in our research that flexibility with these spaces is really important. So you might have a space that provides dining tables in the evening, but during the day that gets used as co-working. And as we said there, a variety of lounge spaces and terrace and external spaces as well are also really important. I touched on earlier on the programming of these spaces, so similar to BTR and perhaps even more so, these are quite managed. There'll often be apps, calendars of events, different sessions that are put on week to week, month to month to really encourage people to come together, and these we found to be really good to form these friendships and sort of the social community that we're looking for within these spaces. So again, this is a really important part of the scheme. Sometimes these are done by management, sometimes there are kind of champions within the residents who live there who will organise or put on some of these types of events. And then in terms of some of the key design principles that we've developed as we've been looking at these schemes, I think we looked at design for diversity, so it's not just all about the bigger spaces for socialising. You want to make sure there's quieter spaces that's supporting both kind of extroverts and introverts, so it's a range of spaces. It's flexibility, so something can host a party one evening, can host a yoga class, and another morning can be a screening space or another time, so spaces that can serve different functions at different times of the day. Making sure we have these informal interactions, so whether that's within circulation spaces or just ensuring that amenities are located on routes that people take every day, so you're able to see whether or not someone's around, and that ties into the next one with sort of visual connections. So again, making sure that the spaces are designed to encourage this community and interaction. Ground floor activation. These schemes are really good for putting front doors and active activities down on ground floor, so that provides passive surveillance to the streets and to spaces outside. Emma touched on the likelihood that people working different hours will feel safe in these spaces because they're well overlooked, they're well managed, and that there are people there at all times. And then nature, again, we sort of talked about creating external spaces and as well as the internal amenity. Just touching briefly on the private studios, so as we said, these schemes are a collection of private studios, small private studios, and then the shared amenity spaces. So again, the most developed guidance on this at the moment is London Plan, and it talks about obviously ensuite rooms. Typically they'll have a small kitchenette space, so there is ability to prepare food within the rooms, desk space, small seating area. And again, that's the private space that you can come into and is your own sort of retreat. But then the idea is you're spending a lot of your time in the shared spaces as well, in addition to this. I won't go through these, but as part of our studies, we picture different potential residents and how they might move through the building, the different spaces they might use at different times, just to sort of really understand what the best uses are are going to be for these schemes. We've done a lot of work on co-living schemes, as Emma said, in London and Bristol and in different places around the country. We've also been recently visiting a number of different schemes. We went to see a scheme just newly opened yesterday in Kingston. And we're working with different operators who may or may not be working on this scheme and getting their feedback. So it's really important that we understand, you know, what's driving the desires here, what sort of amenity spaces people are looking for. And you can see here some of the feedback of what is drawing people to co-living schemes, particularly the inclusive rent and the amenity spaces. And again, we're getting feedback from operators about, you know, what spaces work best, what's proving most popular. And I think when we talk to operators, what they also find again is that they can be quite flexible on this. So they'll have a space that's dedicated for one thing, and if it's not really being used so well, that they can make adjustments depending on who's living in the building at the time. So again, I won't go through these, but again, we've been visiting a number of schemes really, and trying to get the best practice from all the different elements that we've seen in these different places. And similarly, I mentioned at the beginning, one of our colleagues in the office lives in a co-living scheme in London, in Canary Wharf, and we've spoken to him about the different things and what's really attracted him to him. And again, what his real key point of doing that was moving to a different city. New in the city, didn't know anyone, and he's found it a really great opportunity to make friends and really sort of establish a base in his first year in London.
And so I'll finish off just why Cambridge. We've talked kind of, you know, nationally of why this is a good model, but, you know, why is this important that this is a model that we see coming to fruition in Cambridge? So this is mainly kind of data focused, but you know, I think we all know that house prices are increasing all over the country, but especially in Cambridge, and it's the second most expensive place to live in England. And this isn't brand new. Lots of people have been looking into research about why it's an appropriate model for Cambridge. Savills have done a spotlight piece. There's the Cambridge Biomedical Campus that have looked actually why it's a great model for their key workers. And then a third one as well, just about why co-living coming into Greater Cambridge will really help to combat the challenges that we're seeing within housing in the area. There is an increasing demand for rental accommodation in general in Cambridge. You can see there from the stats that privately rented sector is the second most favoured model for housing. And you can see there 822 licensed HMOs, so that is kind of increasing. So really trying, as I said at the start, trying to combat that and bring that down and find a more appropriate, high quality way of living. There is a demand, there is the age range, the demographic of Cambridge, you can see there is a demand for it, as I've talked about that target audience being between 20 and 40. There is a large amount of residents in Cambridge, there's 42% that live in Cambridge city centre, and so actually let's find accommodation for them, and a large amount of professionals as well. I touched on earlier about the kind of NHS and key workers. We know that there's a large amount of campuses, innovation areas in Cambridge, so actually we do have a demographic for that, especially within those sectors of working as well. I think this one is quite telling. I think the kind of lack of graduate retention when we look into it isn't great. You see the kind of big key cities at the top there, Manchester, Birmingham, Glasgow, Edinburgh, Leeds and Bristol. And then you see Cambridge at the kind of towards the bottom, that actually, obviously, Cambridge has a large amount of students, they've probably the best students in the country, but actually that retention is very, very low. And so you want to keep the Cambridge students here, that kind of wealth of education that's been brought here, actually keep them here, keep that feeding into that innovation that we have within the city. So we have to provide housing for these people. This is a bit just about affordability. We've looked at kind of a comparison between co-living and BTR and why it is attractive. You can see there the average rent is significantly lower than BTR. The unit size is quite a bit smaller, but as Dave's mentioned, that kind of wealth of amenity space and shared spaces that you get in addition to that really combats that. The utilities are all included, council tax, Wi-Fi, but the deposit's quite a big one. I think especially that for that postgraduate range of people, they tend to don't have 5 weeks rent just in their back pocket that they can just roll out into a rental place. So actually not having to have that deposit is great. And then the contract length, it tends to be kind of a minimum of 3 months, and you can extend that and you can just keep that as a rolling contract, so that flexibility is there. You're not signing on to a 12-month contract as you might be within a shared household somewhere. So your total kind of monthly cost tends to be around kind of 1,000 to 1,200 mark, and that of course varies across the country and in different areas, but this is kind of on average, so you can see it is significantly cheaper. So just the key benefits for Cambridge, just to kind of drive this home, I think that diversification of the housing range offer is really important to really hit the demand for the housing within Cambridge. That affordability that I've mentioned, and again, just the shared spaces, opportunity to meet people. I think that social side is really important to bring people together and combat that loneliness. The flexibility, I think, is great for just different types of tenure. You find that people sometimes start in a co-living development, they meet friends, and then they move to a BTR development together to go into a 2-bed flat. And that flexibility of how you kind of progress through where you live and how you live is really important. And again, just addressing the demand for the different types of professionals and key workers within Cambridge. And I think people think, you know, this is a really transient community, people will come in and leave, but actually the research we've done and the data we're getting from operators is really important, that people do come and stay. You know, you might have someone coming in for 3 months, but actually it tends to people that people do stay for a year and beyond. One of the places we went to, someone came in the first week and 10 years later, they're still there. So people do come and they do stay because they create these communities around them and they really like that. I could kind of touch briefly on the ambitions for the site, but I might just leave there because we're probably around 25 minutes unless there's more time for me. Okay, so I'll touch on the ambitions for the site. We're still very early stage development for kind of the design process, but what the start of this document really says is that everything we established 5 years ago, you know, we want to keep that high quality, ambitious design coming into what we're doing now, and things obviously have to change slightly. And we previously had a basement, so we were able to put a lot of the kind of ancillary and cars down there. But we just know sustainability-wise and financial, it just doesn't make sense to be doing basements anymore. None of our schemes have basements, so we kind of had to bring that to ground level. So there is a bit of change. But I think the main kind of established design parameters are still there. We very much want to focus the kind of heart of the scheme. We've created House Green, and that responds to the symmetry of the existing setting of House Place and the development in Lawrence Weaver Road as well, and creates this heart of the development. And then the access into the site, we've got main kind of entrance to Darwin Green, to the kind of north of this plan. So actually that's where we create our main entrance along Lawrence Weaver Road as you kind of progress towards Darwin Green there. And it's all about these kind of series of gateways as you progress. So we've got the NIA building, which sits on Huntingdon Road, and then a series of kind of marker buildings as you work your way up. And I think the design aspect of what we've spoken about, kind of activating and animating space, is really important. So that green space, we want to kind of surround that with active overlooking uses. So kind of formally fronting it and making it feel safe, and again, responding to that formal character within the context. And then a more formal edge. This again is very similar to our previous proposal. We had a formal edge which reflects the development to the west of it and creating that strong frontage along Lawrence Weaver Road. A more fragmented frontage to House Place. Again, this previously had buildings quite close to the development in Darwin Green. You can see up to the kind of north of the page. But actually what we've done is taken that further away. So there's a greater buffer there, and actually place a kind of Muse Street along that edge to create more sensitivity. But this actually is more important with the House Place residents. So we're creating a bigger buffer between our buildings, proposed buildings, and the adjacent buildings on House Place. And then we have a series of building plots as such. And within each of these buildings, there is a ground communal garden with homes overlooking it. So you can see these series of green spaces that move the way through the site, and then a Muse Road over to the east. And this Muse Road will be multifunctional. It'll prioritise cyclist and pedestrian movement, but it will accommodate some kind of parking and servicing that is required for kind of bins and refuse and everything like that.
Could you start to draw to a conclusion now?
This is literally my last slide. So this kind of accumulates in an illustrative master plan. As I said, at very early stages, we've been talking to your colleagues at Cambridge, kind of formulating these ideas. But I think all the research we've done on co-living, and that'll go into kind of with BTR as well, we're now getting into the detail of this, of how these spaces are going to kind of emerge, and this will come together. So I can leave it there.
Thank you very much. You can see an enthusiastic waving over there. This is an indication of questions rather than anything else. I'm going to start this time with Councillor Richard Williams and Councillor Toomey Hawkins, Councillor Simon Smith. I'll come to the others.
Thank you, Chair. Just three questions. Firstly, I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about what the viability issues are with the existing consent, which I think is where you started off and said that was the reason why this was coming forward. I would be interested in that. Secondly, I was just wondering about, if I get some clarity on the rent figures that you showed a few slides ago, where I think you were suggesting that you were comparing it with existing shared occupancy rent of £1,400. I just had a quick look on Rightmove, and I could find a lot of rooms a lot cheaper than that. So I was just wondering if you could tell me exactly what you were comparing there, because maybe you weren't comparing what I thought you were comparing. And then just in terms of the issue of Cambridge, I'd just be interested in the sort of work you've done around that and graduate retention within the city, because Cambridge is obviously rather different to London and places like Bristol, which are much bigger cities with more employment opportunities. So you'd expect less retention here. And, you know, I teach at the university myself, I teach law. Very few of my law students would stay in Cambridge. They all go to London because that's where the legal world is. It's not in Cambridge. So I'm just wondering if you could give us a bit more detail about what research you've done about exactly what the demand would be for it. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. So on the viability, this is a kind of brief overview of why this isn't viable. And I'll speak for the developers here. Please tell me if I'm wrong. But I think, as I've said, the main issue was the basement. It's hugely costly to build a basement of this scale, so we've had to change it. But also, I think when we get into the tenures of housing, that actually having a range of different housing tenures and offers creates bigger demand. Actually, if you're doing complete BTR, there might not be the demand for 500 BTR units. And we used to have an apart hotel, and now we just know that apart hotel wouldn't be viable in any way. We talked to different operators of the apart hotel, and it just wouldn't be successful. There's a number of other apart hotels within the area. There's one in northwest Cambridge, and the market. Yeah. Sorry. So we're just, instead of using apart hotel, we're just looking at those different tenures. Second was the comparison between BTR and the co-living cost. We've just looked at an average across the area. We're kind of going through this development of collecting data. So the developer has a number of kind of other schemes that we've looked at. So we're just looking at average. So there will be some less, there will be some more. So that BTR cost is just an average across Cambridge. And then the demand of kind of retaining students. I suppose you are right, the employment opportunities, but for employment opportunities to come here, you need to provide housing. It's a bit chicken and egg. If there's no housing, there's no employment opportunities. And actually, it's not just about housing, is it? It's about overall economic growth. And so for a city to grow economically, we need to provide employment, we need housing, and we need to fulfill lots of these things. So we need to do a bit of both to get people to stay, and therefore other companies will want to move here. Lots of companies are moving out of London. Lots of people can't afford to be there anymore. They're kind of either moving outside London, people are working from home, but actually they still want offices. So if there's alternatives, and therefore people are willing to live in other locations, I think hopefully, there will be the demand.
Councillor Simon Smith.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your presentation and the introduction of this new co-living tenures. Very interesting. Nationally described space standards are, I think, 36 square metres without a bath, 37 with a bath. And you said the studios would range. It would be interesting to tell me what was the size of the studio, the first studio you showed in the slide, and the largest studio. And so, how do you deal with this nationally described space standard requirement? Thank you.
Well, the national, you are right, it's 36 or 37. I'll maybe tag team this with both Peter and Dave. I think they are significantly less, and we'll all kind of hold our hands up, especially, I think, if you imagine moving from a larger home into that, it feels quite different, but it's just a different layout. I was surprised the first time seeing it, and the one we saw yesterday actually felt quite comfortable. But you do have just a reduction of that amenity space, and it very much feels like a studio. Some of them are quite laid out quite nicely. You still get a separation of spaces, but you tend to have a queen-size bed, a very small kitchenette, so you're maybe getting a dual hob and a small fridge freezer, but then you have your communal kitchen, which kind of adds to that, so you have more
That's
space.
not the answer to the question. Answer the question, please. How are you squaring this with nationally described space standards? That's the question.
Yeah, Councillor Smith. So co-living, I guess we introduced at the start, it is classed as a sui generis product, so it isn't a C3 residential product, and your nationally described space standards apply to a C3 product, and you're correct in saying the minimum is 37. So there isn't a policy requirement on a co-living scheme for the units to meet the space standards. And I think the point is that, yeah, the units themselves, the studios, may not comply, but that is then, that sort of reduction is offset then by the excellent communal facilities that would be provided for residents, which we've touched on.
Councillor Toomey Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair. You skipped me over earlier on, but it's okay. The space standards question has been asked and answered. Just going back on, there's two things I want to talk about, is the cost and also the facilities. Now, your comparison of rental costs, I found a bit intriguing, because in your presentation, you talked about comparing with HMOs, and yet with cost, you're comparing with buy-to-rent or build-to-rent or whatever it is, which doesn't make sense. And I think this is just, sorry, dissing HMOs, I found unsatisfactory because they have a purpose. And, dissing them completely, even though there are those who provide good ones, please be careful going forward in future. But one of the other things is, so why do you compare rental prices with BTR rather than HMOs, which is what you're trying to compare the design with? And yes, there are cheaper ones. Secondly is, in terms of the co-living spaces, I'm sorry, your figures didn't add up. Can you bring up the slide with the facilities that people wanted? 30-something% want gyms, and 12 wanted something else, and 10 wanted something else. All right, so what do the others want? You didn't talk anything about, where they're going to wash their clothes, right? The things that people need for day-to-day living. There's nothing on there. Why not?
I'll go to the spaces one first, as we're on the slide. These are almost additional spaces. I think it's, as an operator, there will be space for laundry. There's quite a big laundry room that everyone will go down there, and there's a multitude of... all the operators we speak to, they're not going to not have a laundry space. I think with this operating model, they're on site, they're there, and actually for them, this is a business. They want to keep people there, they want to keep people renting, so not providing these basic facilities would be actually detrimental to what they're doing as a business, as an offer. So
I'm sorry, but unless it's written up there, we can't just assume it will be there.
I think this slide is showing the sort of top 5 in a recent survey of amenities. I don't think anyone's putting laundry as their sort of number one thing as to why they're moving into a scheme. But yes, it would be it's always part of the offer, and obviously required as part of that living.
Can I come back, please, Chair? Have you seen any adverts on like spare room or something like that? People specify they want to see washing machine and dryer. Right? That's a requirement. Gym, I've never seen somebody wanting a gym.
That probably leads on to the HMO conversation, though, because the people in spare room tend to be shared households, maybe HMOs, where you might not have a laundry facilities.
Yeah, and Councillor Hawkins, we can assure you that there would be laundry facilities provided for future residents.
Right, members, we have a number of others wanting to ask questions. Did you want to come back again?
Sorry, second question.
Okay.
So yes, and of course we can do that. We can go into the data of the HMOs. It's just something we don't have to hand. It's obviously a lot easier to get all this data for BTR from the operators, but we can come back to you with that comparison of the data.
I think it is just on that, Councillor Hawkins. The co-living, it is an alternative model to HMOs, and I think we totally acknowledge that HMOs in Cambridge definitely serve a really important purpose, but I think there are a number of HMOs which are unregulated in the city as well, and actually the standard of living provided by some of them is substandard and things. And one thing with the co-living, it will be a high quality product, excellent shared facilities, and our sort of view is that that will actually help to return existing HMOs to the private rental market.
Members, I have a number of others who wanted to ask questions. Councillor Smart, Councillor Porra, Councillor Khan, Councillor Bradnam, and Councillor Garvey, Councillor Thornborough, and I have one or two I would hope to ask myself. I should explain that the order is not related to how quickly you could necessarily get your hands up at the start. So forgive me for that if I appear to have skipped some people. So, Councillor Smart.
Very interesting, and I was talking about something similar myself the other day to the Cabinet Member for Housing here in Cambridge. You kind of presented a parallel universe, but then that is life today, I guess. There are the haves and the have-nots, and you're talking about the haves that can afford to live in this kind of accommodation, and that's the crux of my question, is affordability. So housing, we have a 40% affordability criteria, build to rent 20%, co-living, I understand, is 40%. I don't know if that's what you would be providing, you never said, so that's my question. What percentage for the co-living element? And student housing, I presume, 40%. In terms of space standards, I just want to touch on that as well, because that's always been a favourite interest of mine. So you mentioned London, I think, in passing. That's 18 square metres. Now, you seem to be saying it was something different here, possibly more, maybe 25 square metres. So our homeless pods are 25 square metres, and there are particular reasons for that, which I challenged in planning committee before. And that's because people come off the street, they have mental health issues, so smaller space is sometimes appropriate, and careful planning, and it does all work, I think. But for you, I'm not sure. For these sorts of accommodation, for young people, possibly, who might live in very small spaces, is it appropriate? Yeah, that's it. I'll just stick there because keep it brief.
Yeah, Councillor Smart, I'll just pick up on the affordability point. So yeah, as we'd said, co-living, it is a new concept, and there isn't any clear position nationally or sort of locally on how affordable housing should be dealt with. As I said, it is a sui generis product, and this is an issue which we are in discussions with your officers at the moment. So our view is co-living, as I said, it is a form of build-to-rent accommodation, and we feel that it should be treated similarly to that, in that 20% of the unit should be affordable, and that would either be dealt with via an on-site provision, or it would be dealt with via an off-site commuted sum. So as I said, we are currently in discussions with your officers regarding this.
On that point, I'd just like to ask Philippa Kelly to come in, comment on that.
Thank you. And further to Peter's response, I just wanted to clarify that we're still in discussions through the pre-application PPA process. And as he mentioned, there is limited guidance at a national level in respect of co-living and affordable housing provision. We've got new joint local plan policy that's emerging, so we can see the direction of travel, which the expectation of that it will be a requirement to provide 40% affordable housing. But as you will all be aware, that's a direction of travel, and we can only afford minimal weight to that joint local plan policy at the present time. But we're still working proactively with the developer team to work through these issues. Thank you.
Councillor Porra.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I share the same concern. So the size policy is really strict, 37 metres, and that's, I think, for one person, if I remember rightly. And that also, we have a really strong policy on private amenity, not shared. So what you're proposing potentially is to drop the space standards by a third, remove the private amenity space, and sort of make up for it from some shared kitchens. And I do understand that the market's horrific, it's so expensive. But I think as a planning authority, we have a responsibility to have a high quality standard. And my concern is what we'll actually get is really small things, missing private amenity with a shared kitchen where you've got to have a lock on your fridge if you want to actually put anything bigger than a bag of peas in there. And then the rents will only be 10% less than build to rent. And we may not get 40% affordable. I mean, what you show is, you know, impressive with the shared spaces, but for me that shouldn't be instead of a minimum level of living space. And I suspect policy-wise, you're saying the national space standards don't apply. I'm looking at Philippa. But I would be really concerned if you're not only avoiding that, you're avoiding the affordable and you're potentially avoiding private amenity space. And that's a real, certainly in the city planning, it's quite a red line to have some private amenity space. So it's an interesting one. I can see why it's really attractive to a developer because you can get smaller units in, but I'm worried we're slightly, you know, I would hope for the best quality in Cambridge. You know, this is a high-performing city. We get exceptional things above policy requirements, so I would really urge you to consider that. And also just to check, so broadly it's not going to look much different from the thing that was consented, I think is what you said. So we're not looking at higher, wider. Yeah, okay, that's good to hear. Thank you. Because again, student accommodation is smaller space for a reason, because in theory you're only there for 26 weeks of the year or for 1 year. You know, this isn't that. This is a permanent place for someone to live for a longer term. Thank you.
Any comment, or shall we take further questions?
And yeah, I completely understand the kind of the smaller space, and I think it was good you mentioned the PBSA there, because it's almost like an evolution of a PBSA in a way, and that's why you tend to see it. Purpose-built student accommodation. So people tend to be, they've lived in purpose-built student accommodation, and then when they graduate, they move in here, so they're kind of used to that way of living. So we do understand, and that's why it's really important about how you kind of design the other spaces as well. But yes, it's, yeah, as Peter said, it's not classified as C3. That's why we don't have the nationally prescribed space standards.
Councillor Khan.
First of all, I'm going to express an interest here in the sense that my sister is the publicity officer and promoter of the Lancaster Co-Housing. So I've also got award-winning co-housing in my ward at Marmalade Lane. So I've got a particular interest in that side of it, but this is not exactly the same as that. And I'm interested in it because you're basically developer-led, and obviously if some forms of co-housing are really going to get developed, they're going to have to go on, it's going to have to come into sort of commercial developments as well, otherwise they won't do it. So that side of it's interesting. But I'm a bit concerned about, I'm not going to comment about the size, that point has been really well made already, but I'm going to comment about the social side of it. The part of the co-housing are mainly seem to attract people in the age range 40 to 60 rather than 20 to 40. So it's a different market. They tend to be large units, house units, rather than large flats, rather than these small pseudo units you're talking about. So you're talking about a different market. Now, co-housing works in particular because the people get together and design it themselves and get involved in it. So you've got a group of people already are social. And it's a particular sector of the market. My sister loves it. She's very sociable. She really fits in it. It works beautifully well. I would find it, I'm not naturally personally so sociable. I like to have my own private space. I don't think it would suit me, but I can see the attraction. There's a real market for it. You're dealing with people coming in afresh. These are mainly single individuals coming in afresh. You've not got this pre-existing social unit. I want to know how that is going to be developed, because it is essential for the combined areas to work that the people are sociable, and not everybody is. And if you're coming in afresh, you may end up just having individual living in the units and not using the combined units. What sort of structures, what sort of social structures are you going to introduce to make sure that that would work at a local level? And how does it work in the other units that have been set up? I'd just be interested in that side of it.
Yes, so I think Dave touched on earlier, the operator has to do quite a lot of the heavy lifting to get this community established and get it going, and it does come from programmed events. There's lots of spaces there, but actually what's happening in those spaces is really important, and making it inclusive for all. So it's not necessarily just going to be Friday drinks every Friday. It's about having a diverse range of offers to get people in. And so it might be drinks, it might be a yoga class, it might be a mummies and babies class, but it's having those range of activities that happen throughout, and that programming of spaces that brings the community together, helps people meet. They then can take ownership. And I think what's great about co-housing is the stewardship that goes along with it. People have a real ownership, and that's what helps it kind of thrive. But I think the operator has to almost help that grow. People want to take ownership for some of the events. So one of the places we went to, there's a lady who loves to do kind of HIIT exercise classes. So she runs a HIIT exercise class every Tuesday night. And there's other things like that. They have kind of art classes and even inviting local people in from the community as well. Like there might be an art fair showing. There's one space actually, they change one of the spaces into a place for worship every Sunday morning. And that brings people from the outside community in. So it's not just very insecular, it can be quite open to the surrounding context as well. But I think to begin with, the operator has to really establish these processes and these programs to get people to buy in.
In that context, the Lancaster House, where my sister lives, has its own workspaces as well, and not just a basically a number of work units which are cooperatively managed. Are you foreseeing anything on that front? Because that obviously also brings people together in a different.
To be honest, we haven't got to that level of detail yet. So.
Members, I think it would be unfair to press further on this point. We have about 5 minutes left, not only before the end of our session. I think having given our developers 25 minutes, we should confine ourselves as well. I'd quite like to ask 1 or 2 questions myself. That may not occur. More importantly, the contractors are due to start again at 5 minutes past. I have on my list councillors Bradnam, Garvey and Thornborough, and can I ask members to be fairly concise in their questions, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll certainly be. Thank you for your presentation. Could you put up the slide of the size differences? I just want to have that there, you know, the space constraints, as it were.
Yes.
Yes. So, yes, 22 metres squared on the left-hand side and 38 on the right. So what concerns, so all of what the other members have said applies, and I just wanted us to be mindful of that, because my questions were around, for example, who does the cleaning in this? It's a bit like Councillor Hawkins' question about the washing machine. Who does the cleaning in these? Do you have to go out and borrow a shared hoover, or do you have to have your own hoover? Where would you store it in that tiny space? Where would you put your washing when you're trying to dry it? You might have been to the laundry, perhaps it doesn't, you know, you didn't have space. Where do you bring it back? That sort of thing. So will there be there'll obviously be a concierge service for the shared spaces, but so I'm concerned about this because it comes under sui generis. There is no national guidance about how we as planners can inform and frame this kind of thing that's coming forward. So I'm worried about this because we have no levers in sui generis applications. I also wanted to know, where was your data on loneliness drawn on? Was it from UK examples? And finally, what happens when you have a pandemic? I'm just slightly concerned about, yes, obviously people are relying on their own personal space, but you know, this is on the assumption that you've got amenity, communal shared space outside. But, you know, what would happen if you had a pandemic and you wanted to go and work? Would you have to do all your work in your own little 22 square metres? Just some thoughts like that. And also the community building aspect of it that people have mentioned. People are likely to be coming in and going out. And how do you build community in this sort of arrangement? Thank you.
Yes, some important considerations there. Don't worry, we won't necessarily expect you to explain how this will be managed in the case of a future pandemic, but you see the point that we're getting at, and if you'd like to comment, that'd be welcome.
This is not a pipe dream. This is quite possible.
I'll answer what I have the facts and figures to. So in terms of cleaning the flat, obviously it's your own job to clean your own flat, as everyone's house, but they don't store any of the hoovers or everything in the rooms. There's almost like a vending machine, of kind of library of things downstairs that you go and you rent and you hire as and when you need. And there's multiple of these, so it can facilitate all of them at the residents. The other question on cleaning, what was the other question on cleaning? Oh, the washing, yeah, your laundry. So these laundry rooms, the ones we all seen, they have lots and lots of washer and dryers, then lots of space for drying as well. It's all accommodated for within the kind of communal spaces.
Right. Now, we have actually just run out of time, but I'm going to use Chairman's discretion to extend it by 5 minutes, particularly with the understanding of the contractors who haven't started again. Councillor Thornborough and then Councillor Garvey, please.
So we have something in Cambridge which is very, very much like this, and it's at Devonshire Garden. It's all built to rent, and there's a lot of houses, and there are a lot of studio flats. It is exactly this, and they have a lot of spaces like you're talking about, laundries, shed tool rooms to fix your bike. This is exactly the same. That is all built to rent. That is all 20%, including the service charge is 20% for affordable. So that was dealt with by the City Planning Committee. Lots and lots of these conversations through the process to achieve that, and the Planning Committee. So I really think you need to look at that, and that is in the process of being built, and I'm really hopeful that that will be very successful. The other important thing there is their bike standards. They chose to do 1 bike storage per individual living there, not per bedroom. So I highly recommend you look at that, because it sorts out lots of these issues we've been talking.
Okay, noted. Councillor Garvey.
My question has been asked. Thank you.
Right. Good. Well, members, I think that brings us to the end of the questions. I should perhaps have declared, I invited colleagues to declare an interest. I should have declared an interest myself. I wasn't until, I see it was November of last year, director of a co-living company, although we mainly focused on HMOs and serviced accommodation. We have, actually, the company has been closed down, so not directly involved anymore, but I have always appreciated the social... Interesting, my computer is arguing with my assessment just now, so I'll have to just check whether my declaration is correct. You know, Siri clearly thinks it isn't. But forgive me. I have always been entirely persuaded of the social benefits of it. I think in Cambridge we have more to learn on this. There are a range of options. We have a lot of experience of HMOs, many of them not by design, not necessarily doing it again. It won't work anymore. Sorry. Yeah, so we have experience of a range of options, and I was glad that Councillor Thornborough mentioned the Devonshire Gardens one. There is clearly some ground to be made up here. I think a key focus will be affordability. You tackled that, but whatever the percentage of technically affordable is to be, it has to be an important benefit, in my view, of all co-living, that is more affordable as well as more sociable, less lonely for particularly younger people moving into the area, although you rightly pointed out it isn't necessarily confined to people who are going to stay for a short term. Some will stay longer. So I think we as a committee, when it comes to addressing your proposals, will have more to learn. And I think it would be very helpful if you can relate them to examples, preferably some in Cambridge, although there aren't that many, so we can understand more clearly exactly what all the implications might be. Again, that's more of a comment than a question, so no need to respond to that. Members, I think that draws our discussions and our presentations to a close. Just for me to thank our developers for coming along and presenting to us today. We appreciate all the time and effort that's gone into that and the thought that's gone into designing this. It's very helpful to us in our processes, and we look forward to seeing you at the next stages of this application. So with that, I will close this part of the session. Let me just say before we disperse that the next meeting of the JDMC, the Joint Development Management Committee, is on 21st of January 2026, and with that, just to say if members wouldn't mind staying on for a moment afterwards, for reasons I'll explain. But with that, let me just wish all members of the committee and our visitors and all those following what we're doing a happy Christmas, and say, look forward to seeing you in the new year. Thank you very much.